And a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Ryan Roberts. I am not Brian Driscoll, so I apologize, everyone. But he has a prior commitment that came up kind of at the last second, so I'm filling in. I'm pinch hitting for Brian Driscoll. The topic doesn't change, though. We are still going to talk about the Notre Dame defense and the questions and that have to be answered, etc. We're going to have some fun with that. But first, some recruiting news for Notre Dame that Ryan Roberts can't really even talk about, which is shocking and on a lot of levels, but it has nothing to do with football. It has to do with baseball and a local product. Jace Lee has committed to the University of Notre Dame for baseball. He is a rising junior, so he's the class of 24. And let me just tell you, he's a local kid. He goes to St. Joe High School. He is a stud. This kid, this is a great get for Notre Dame. They got in on him early, obviously. He's got 2 years of high school left. This kid is a stud. He's a leadoff hitter, center fielder. Kid hits for power. He's fast as lightning. Obviously, I've coached against him. He's a one-man wrecking machine. They won the sectional championship on a walk-off home run that he hit. The kid is just a stud. He is really, really, really good. So huge pickup for Coach Stifler and the Notre Dame baseball team. I think it's their first commitment since he walked in the door. So that's exciting. And he's a local kid too. So that's exciting as well. So Bryce Lee going to Notre Dame. So that's pretty cool.
Is that a little early for baseball players usually, Vince?
I haven't really, to be honest with you, I haven't really followed a whole lot of baseball. Sometimes kids will commit early. I mean, they can't obviously get the official, offer and all that fun stuff. But there was another kid, the Lynch kid from Penn. He was a baseball player. He committed really early as well. And he was the starting quarterback on the football team his sophomore year and stopped playing football after sophomore year because he committed to Notre Dame. So, yeah, I don't know if that's just a local thing, but it's kind of similar to the kid that committed from Penn for basketball the other day. That's where he wanted to go. Notre Dame was where he wanted to go. He got the offer and he committed. And you shut it down and you go. When you know, I guess. So when local kids want to go to Notre Dame, they get that offer and they're gone. So good for him.
Yeah, no, man, that's awesome. So you say he's a center fielder, power hitter, right?
He was hitting three. He hit leadoff, but he also hit 3-4. And he's just he's a big kid for a sophomore. He's definitely over 6 foot tall. I mean, he's put together very, very well. I mean, the kid's a good player, very good player. So
you think I'm making you put your analyst hat on for a second here. You think projection wise, you think he's a center fielder on the next level? He's a corner outfielder. What do you kind of see with him from that sense?
So corner outfielder, I think more like power, just like straight power, not super athletic, kind of similar like a first baseman, that kind of a thing. The kid's an athlete. He can cover a lot of ground in center field. I think that's a good fit for him. And I think he's only going to get better over the next 2 years of high school. He's playing high level travel ball, obviously. Like I said, he hits for power now. I was telling Ryan in our little pregame here, he didn't get a hit off of us, but he hit a friggin' moonshot down the left field line that was fouled by about 5 feet. That's probably still climbing as we speak. But the kid has a ton of power, but he is super athletic, steals bases, that kind of a thing. So I think he projects as a center fielder, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I love that we kind of started the show off this way because obviously we talk football every day, but I mean, Notre Dame baseball just coming off a great season. Notre Dame hockey is a great program. Obviously, the women's and men's basketball team are really good as well. So Notre Dame has exciting times just from a pure sports spectrum, not just football. So I'm happy to see that baseball got a huge pickup.
Absolutely. Well. Yeah, huge. Like I said, it's a big pickup for Notre Dame and their new staff, et cetera, with Coach Stifler coming in here. I would say, I don't even know how they even rank baseball players, as far as like stars and all that stuff. All I know is what I saw with my own 2 eyes, the kid is an athletic power hitter who can move around in the outfield. So that's a huge pickup. I think that's a big pickup for Notre Dame.
Do you think, and I know I'm asking you to project 2 years forward from a high school sophomore, which is a little tough, but is he a kid that you think gets drafted coming right out of high school, or is a kid? I'm just trying to minds.
That's a really good question because there have been kids that have been drafted from around here in the past, but it's very few and far between. This kid was one of the best players in the area as a sophomore. So I would say that there's a good chance. And the major league draft is like what, 40 round. I mean, it's deep.
It's long,
It's long and it's deep, right? Yeah. I would think he would have a shot. Absolutely. And now that his profile is one where he's already committed to an ACC school, I think that raises his profile a little bit too. Sure. So I think there's going to be more eyes on him moving forward for good reason. But yeah, I think he definitely could be drafted after his senior year. No question. The kid's good. The kid's really good.
It's awesome. Yeah, I know they always have like so many players picked. I'm just like, lost count after the first 17 rounds or whatever.
I know, right? Seriously. Like, all right, cool. It's so many. And they have, I guess they have less spots to fill now that they've kind of shrunk down the minor leagues a little bit over the last couple of years. But you figure all these teams that they have to fill, you got like multiple rookie teams in low A and high A and double A and triple A. There's a lot of spots to fill. So you almost need to have that big of a draft. You know what I mean? But for sure. They've definitely narrowed that down a little bit. And but no, I think this kid definitely has a possibility of being drafted in 2 years, considering his projection, obviously. Sure. And if he keeps going in that direction, I think there's a good chance.
Yeah, exponential growth. I mean, it's pretty
Absolutely.
cool. I mean, to be able to see that type of player kind of firsthand from your perspective, I think that's really, really cool. I mean, I remember I coached against I only coached football and tracks when I, here in New Jersey. And I remember I coached against Jonathan Taylor when he was a senior at Salem.
Okay.
And he was playing Group of 1 football, and that's the lowest group in New Jersey. And it was it was
men and boys.
Man playing with children. It really was, man. Like, it was nuts. It was absolutely insane. And then he went to the track, and he ran like 10.4 something 100 meters at 210 pounds. So yeah, every time you go to see one of those types of kids, you're like, Jesus, man, not made on the same planet as I was, I don't think. But
man, unbelievable. So so that's the kind of recruiting news that we'll jump on. It was kind of fun because usually Ryan is the guru of recruiting. So it's kind of fun to talk about a guy he doesn't really know much about. So that was a lot of fun. And again, a big pickup for Stifler. So I just got a text from Brian. He goes, "What the heck are you guys talking about?" So that's awesome.
It's a Notre Dame podcast.
It's a exactly. This is big news, right? So anyway, we will shift to the topic at hand. We will have a mailbag, everybody. And so once we get through our topic talking about the defense, get your questions in. As we see them, we'll star them. We'll come back to them. We'll talk about them at the end. So we will have our mailbag at the end. But we are going to talk some defense right now, Ryan. So questions that Notre Dame must answer on defense, unknowns, what improvements do they need to make, etc. There's actually for a side of the football that has been the strength of this Notre Dame team for, let's call it the last decade, right? It's been the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of question marks going into this year, some position battles, some bigger things to talk about, but there's still some questions on the defensive side.
There is, and I think it's an interesting one because there's also a lot to be really excited about, obviously, right? Like, I think questions aren't always a negative, right? Like, there's a connotation over like question marks, but sometimes question marks are good. I mean, last year, how good Cam Hart was going to be was a little bit of a question mark, right? And then he ends up being, the best corner on the team by a landslide, right? So I think there's a lot of interesting headlines to take a look at this fall, especially coming out of the spring. And if you missed our show yesterday, you should go take a look at, because me and Brian spent 3 hours just kind of talking about what there is to be excited about from the defensive side of the football. The positives, the biggest takeaways that should have Notre Dame fans in a really positive mindset. So this is kind of the adverse kind of mind scope here today, right? Like, we're going to take a look at things that could be don't want to call it a hindrance, don't want to call it a crutch, but like some things that need to be kind of figured out.
Absolutely.
So it's a really talented team, but anytime you're going from into a fall semester, into the fall camp and everything, there's going to be some questions you have to answer. It doesn't have to be a negative. It's just, this is the important things that Notre Dame needs to answer entering the camp.
Absolutely. So let's start with the biggest kind of overall question about the defense, and that's, of course, the fact that they have a brand new defensive coordinator, right? Al Golden comes in, third defensive coordinator in 3 years. Obviously, not for the normal reasons that you change out defensive coordinators, considering the second one is still on the staff as now the head coach, but you still have the third defensive coordinator in as many years. So how quickly can Al Golden and the staff and the players, all get on the same page? I think that is a legitimate question about this team. And I think it's a legitimate question about all brand new defensive coordinators. I mean, look, Al Golden's walking into an amazing situation. It's not a complete rebuild. It's not a situation where he is looking to be the savior of the defense, kind of like Ohio State situation. It's a completely different situation. He's walking into a defensive room that Marcus Freeman had going in the right direction. I mean, they were a really good defensive team overall, but what does it look like under Al Golden? And how long is that going to take for them to look like a championship level defense if they get to that point at all?
It's a great point. I mean, especially when you're comparing to Ohio State, which is the first game, right? Like to your point there, Vince, Jim Knowles is coming in and they're kind of like, you need to save this, buddy. Like, this is not good right now. And it hasn't been for a couple years.
Right.
Like, you need to flip the script here and get everything going. Al Golden's responsibility is, hey, Marcus Freeman last year in his first year had a lot of good signs on the defensive side of the football. There's a lot of positives to take from the 2021 season. We want you to take that, keep the philosophy the same, add your touch, and take it to the next level. Like, that's what Al Golden is brought here to do. Now, the biggest question mark for me is, and I've been very vocal about this, I like Al Golden a lot. I remember, my first memories of him, I don't remember him when he was a defensive coordinator at Virginia. I know Brian talks about that a ton because obviously he has the Virginia ties.
Sure.
But I remember Al Golden most when he was taking over an absolutely putrid program at Temple.
Yeah,
right? Like, Temple was a bad program, Vince. It was so bad. And he started such a good kind of momentum shift in Temple that they were getting guys like Jeff Collins and what was the guy that was just at Boston College a couple years ago that was at Colorado State last year? His name is escaping me. Italian guy. Sorry. Yeah, it'll come back to me in a minute. But so he had a string of some really good coaches at Temple. And it started with Al Golden because Temple was just, my biggest recollection was my first game that I ever went to was a Temple game.
Okay.
Playing at the Vets at the time, which were the Eagles used to play.
Yep.
And they played against Michael Vick at Virginia Tech, and they got absolutely slaughtered. It was actually kind of close at halftime, and then Virginia Tech was like, nah. And that was like when Temple was winning like 1 game a year, 2 games a year, maybe 3 in a good year. Like, they were a bad program. Al Golden came in, and he completely flipped that in a couple years, and they were a very competitive team.
Yeah.
And then Al goes to Miami, goes to University of Miami, Florida, the Hurricanes. And I thought he did a pretty good job, right? Like he was dealing with some sanctions during his time. And there were a lot of like negative things that were kind of going against Al Golden's momentum there. But I thought he had some good signs of points. And then obviously most recently, he's with the Cincinnati Bengals and he helped these linebackers, Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson specifically, turn into good football players and a really quick. So he's had the head coaching experience. He's had the NFL experience and he's been a defensive coordinator. The problem is, and I wish Brian was on because I know he's in the chat. Maybe he'll pop it in here, but 2004, I think was the last time he was a defensive coordinator in any capacity. Right. So like it has been a long time, man. So like, that's my biggest question outside of just Al Golden putting his own spin on it and taking it, and kind of manufacturing it the way he wants, because it's not broken, right? Like it's working. It's just now about taking it to the next level. So I'm looking at Al Golden and I am very positive about this move. And I'm very anxious to just kind of see his spin on the defense because I like what Marcus Freeman was doing last year in his first year. The unsettlement is he hasn't been asked to do this particular role in like almost 20 years.
Right.
Like, that's the fact of it. Can he do it? Everything I've heard of, he's a really smart defensive mind. He's a really smart football guy in general. Right. I have no doubt that he's going to do it, but until we tangibly see it on the fields, it is a major question mark. There's no doubt about it.
It has to be. He's brand new to the system. He hasn't been a coach at Notre Dame. So there's that aspect of it, right? It's Notre Dame. It's a little bit different, right? And then also you're not the head man. Now, he wasn't the head man with the Bengals. He was just the linebackers coach. So, I mean, he knows what it's like to be a subordinate, coming off of being a head coach. So that part I don't worry about. I look at his history as a head coach as nothing but beneficial to Marcus Freeman. I think that is actually awesome. And Brian just chimed in. 2005 was the last time that Al Golden was the defensive coordinator. So you weren't far off. So it's been a long time. And, coordinating a defense, setting up a practice schedule, doing all of those different things, it's different than being a linebackers coach, right? Sure. And it's different than being the head coach as well. So a lot of things have changed since 2005. Okay. And so putting together a practice schedule, doing all of those different things, that's a legitimate question mark, right?
Sure.
Do they have the same philosophy? I think they do. I think that's one of the reasons that Marcus Freeman brought in Al Golden, right? I think they have a very similar defensive philosophy. Now, the nuts and bolts, the X's and O's, I think are going to be a little bit different. So there's going to be a learning curve to a degree. Sure. How he uses the linebackers, for example, because he is also the linebacker coach, how he uses stunts and blitzes, and, he's going to be more 4 down as we saw. But, what was the major topic of conversation during the season last year? Why do they keep going to the 3 down? All of that. So you're not going to see as much 3 down. You're going to see more 4 down. You're going to see some different X's and O's type stuff. But I think the philosophy is the same. So how long is that going to take to mesh up with the players, right? Coming off of what Marcus was doing, et cetera. So I think that's a legit question. And I don't think we have the answer to that. I mean, you have a month of training camp, but we're not going to get an answer to that. I'm not even going to say we get an answer to that during Ohio State. I think it's going to be a few games in before the defense is 100% comfortable with everything that they're doing. And I don't think that that's a problem. I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that's normal, frankly.
And I would say the biggest thing that I took away, Vince, honestly, and it's a great word to use, is the philosophy, right? Like, I'm not overly worried about 4-man, 3-man. Like, I'm not worried about the 3-4, 4-3 conversation, because at the end of the day, you're so much sub package now, man. Like, I care about if you're playing 3-man a ton or versus 4-man, sure.
Right.
But with the multiplicity, is that a word?
Ooh, I like that.
Multiplicity. We'll say it's a word if it's not.
It is now.
With how much this team wants to use different fronts, I'm not worried about the switching between 4-man and 3-man. Right. Both of them have their strengths. Both of them have their weaknesses. It's about the functional ability to use it at the right times, right? What blitz packages am I using? What coverage shells am I working out of? Am I rotating a ton pre-post snap? What coverages are the ones that I trust the most? Those things, dialing them up at the right time, is what I worry most about. And he's had a ton of experience. And I honestly think that it's a great sign. Marcus Freeman was just the defensive coordinator of this team. Right. And for a lot of people making that transition, I feel like they would have a little bit of the issue with kind of giving people their authority over the defense, right? But clearly, in my opinion, the fact that Marcus Freeman went for an older defensive coordinator, a guy that's been there, done that, been all around at multiple levels in multiple positions, tells me that he is like, you have this, right? Like, we have what we thought was a good baseline for it, kind of a good structure.
Right.
But now you can build upon it, right? Like, you're building now the house after we laid down the platform for it. Right. So that's what I think is showing the trust there for a first-year head coach. A guy that was just a defensive coordinator shows that Al Golden, I think, was the right guy for the job. And we'll see if it works out. But I really do think that it shows that there's a lot of trust that he has in Al Golden. So I'm excited to see it. And I'm also excited just about this. And I know we're talking about this as obviously a big question mark, and it is, and it will remain a question mark until we tangibly see it on the field.
Right.
But the fact that you have a good mix of new coaches that were already on the staff, and you and Chris O'Leary, Mike Mickens obviously returning. You have Al Washington, who was with Ohio State, who's got a big reputation as a recruiter and as a developer of talent. But you also have Marcus Freeman to lean on if you're having any issues, right? Like, he's been there. He is running this defense. He's done the role literally last year. And another huge thing that I don't think we've talked about enough is the fact that although he hasn't been a coach to this point, having a guy like James Laurinaitis as your grad assistant,
I know, right?
Coaching up these linebackers, because like, it's going to be a lot on your plate if you're Al Golden, right? It's going to be like, I have to be a position coach, but yet I'm calling a defense. I'm working on game planning. I'm working on practice schedule. There's a lot on your plate. having a guy like that has also been there,
Yep.
done that at an extremely high level.
Right.
Is huge, because I think there's going to be times where Al's like, all right, you take this or whatever. I'm going to oversee the secondary, for instance. I'm going to go oversee the defensive line, make sure that everything structurally is working the way I want it. So I'm very optimistic, but again, we have to see it. Until we see it, because Coach Golden has not been a defensive coordinator in 17 years. That is the fact of this.
That's a fact, 100%.
But his resume and the experience and the reputation he brings, there's no reason for me to think that he can't do it. It's just we haven't actually seen it yet.
Right. Absolutely correct. And I am also very optimistic as to what this defense is going to do. And I do want to touch on the fact that I think it is the foresight of Marcus Freeman to bring in somebody who is going to take the defense and make it their own. It's not going to be the Marcus Freeman defense and I want you to run it. Like, that is not what he wanted at all. He wanted a guy who was going to come in. And yes, you want somebody to have a shared philosophy as you. Of course you want that. But he's not coming in to run Marcus Freeman's defense. He's going to come in and run Al Golden's defense under the same philosophy. And I think that shows a leadership from Marcus Freeman, because if it was a different scenario, let's say, he made somebody the defensive coordinator and here's my playbook. This is what I want. I need you to run this. It's different because now Marcus Freeman's going to be paying more attention to the defense. He's going to be on the defensive side more. He's not going to be able to be the head coach. So I give him a lot of credit as a first-time head coach to have the foresight to see that that's probably a good idea when he was going out and hiring a defensive coordinator. And that's why it took longer than fans wanted it to, right? They wanted somebody in and they wanted it done and et cetera, et cetera. And he waited for the right guy. And I think that it made a lot of sense. And I think it makes sense moving forward. And I'm very optimistic that this defense is going to take that next step, be very good. I don't know what it's going to look like out the chute. I mean, none of us do. And Marcus Freeman's defense certainly wasn't a finished product in game one. I mean, at all, right? And if there's some faults, on the defense in game one, are we going to talk about it? Absolutely. But it's not a situation where I'm freaking out that the season is a loss already. You know what I mean? So it's going to take a little bit of time, I would imagine. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe things all look great in game one, and that would be great. But I don't think we can realistically say that's what we expect to happen.
Right. Yeah. You can't rush to judgment. There's a transition period that's going to happen. And even this, honestly, Vince, I thought Marcus Freeman was a really good defensive coordinator.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of good defensive coordinators where this is what gets lost a lot in the analytics versus film conversation. Right. It's a game of people, right? So there's defensive coordinators who make mistakes just like players make mistakes, just like everybody in the world makes mistakes. But I also think that having an outside perspective, a guy like an Al Golden coming in who didn't have any ties to Notre Dame, but now evaluates the team what it was last year defensively and says, I really like what Marcus did here, but I also don't like what he did here. And that's kind of the growth that happens, I think, from having that type of outside perspective to begin and to understand what the weaknesses were, understand what the strengths were.
Sure.
Again, very optimistic, but you can't feel great about it yet because it's a new voice.
Right.
And then the whole question mark of, and I already said that I think that it's going to be fine. I think that Al Golden has the trust of Marcus Freeman, clearly. But is there some pushback at some point where if the season does get off to not a great start, let's say they look flat against Ohio State, they're going into the second game, it still kind of looks a little bit lackadaisical. Does Marcus Freeman kind of push back and say, hey, we need to do this now, right? I need to take a little bit more control than I'm taking now. That's where the butting of the heads can start. I don't anticipate that happening, but we can't discount it because, again, your head coach was one of the hottest names at defensive coordinator just last year, right? So there's going to be some coaches are proud people. Honestly,
sure.
As a coach, you think that you know what you're talking about.
It's a safe word, proud.
You can do
it. They're cocky. They're darn right cocky in a good way, but they're they feel like they know they have the answers. And if I don't want a coach that doesn't think they have the answer. You have to be confident in what you're doing.
100%. And to coach at this level, and especially to be a head coach at Notre Dame, there's a subtle confidence, but also you need to be competitive, man. You're playing against some of these great teams each and every week. You have this stigma around your program that they're irrelevant and they're this and they're that, and there's this all this outside noise. You have to be a competitive person. So it's understandable if Marcus Freeman at some points is like that. I think that could be better, right? Like I've done
Right.
this. I think that could be better. And it's about how do those minds mesh in that regard, and those I don't call it attitude, but like their emotions. How do those things mesh when one's kind of pushing back a little bit and other one has to either listen or just completely defer to what they know? I think there has to be a collaborative effort on the defensive side of the football, even though it is going to be Al Golden's show by all by every account that we've heard at this point.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would say cautiously optimistic, but it's still a question, and we'll get our answer eventually. Again, I don't think it'll happen in week 1. Hope it does. That'd be fantastic. But we'll get our question, and I think it's going to work out very, very well, even if it's going to be a different, still successful, but different. And from an overall success, that's kind of the next point that we want to make about this defense. And look, championship level defenses, championship level teams have a good run defense. And some of the people in the chat have brought that up, and I'll pull up one of the things here from our buddy Archer, from Ohio State fan. He says, key questions for me. Golden plus new staff, other two secondary starters. How much can the run D improve and how quickly? Completely legit question from somebody on the outside looking in at Notre Dame. And I appreciate that perspective, Archer, because you're 100% correct. If you look at some of the rankings of past champions, right? Georgia ranked number 2 in run defense. Bama ranked 4th in defense. Notre Dame ranked 37th in run defense. Even LSU in 2019, when they were airing the ball out all over the place, ranked 21st in run defense. Notre Dame ranked 59th that year in 2019 in run defense. So the overall run defense absolutely has to get better, or else, they're not going to be a championship level team, let alone a championship level defense.
Agree completely. And Archer, thank you so much for the comment. As an Ohio State fan yourself, you know about bad run defenses. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I know. I'm sorry. Just a subtle push because Archer's one of my favorites in the chat. But
no doubt,
I think that one thing we've talked a lot about, Vince, is there are some defensive tackles that are a little bit undersized.
Sure.
There are linebackers that have lacked the length to play on the second level and make consistent tackles from a range perspective of the tackling radius, right? And I think that you're seeing that those things should be settled at least on the second level pretty soon here. I mean, if Maris Loifau is what we think he is, then length and athleticism on the second level is never going to be a concern with a guy like a Maris Loifau. And I think that he helps in that regard. But I think honestly, it needs to be better from a technical perspective, right? Like the angles and the ability to wrap on ball carriers and to not miss tackles. Like that's my biggest thing, is that I felt like there were just too many missed tackles during the duration of the season. And
they're in the right spot. They just weren't making the plays.
Right. Yeah. And even some of your guys that you consider more of your short tacklers were missing tackles at points, right? And it happens occasionally. No one's going to miss. No one's ever going to make 100% of their tackles. But it needs to be better than it was for them to really compete at the highest of levels, right? And I think that a lot of that is there's a temperament to playing defense. There's a consistency as far as gap integrity and being able to rally to the football and taking proper angles of pursuits. All those things really matter. So there was a question yesterday on the show about just the technical perspective of the defense, right? Like how much is that going to improve? And I think that needs to be the emphasis, right? From the defensive backs to the linebackers to the defensive linemen, you're in a position where you can never be perfect, right? Like things can always be better from a technical perspective. So I think just the fundamentals are the biggest thing for me that I think need to consistently be improved, because that's how you miss tackles. It's not always a guy runs you over, he's more physically dominating than you, he's faster than you. Those are the cases sometimes, for sure. But more often than not, it's that you're just taking a bad angle. You're attacking the wrong hip. You have your head, you have bad body posture as a tackler. Like those technical things will help you so much in the run game. And for them to be a really good team, they need to make some of these offenses one-dimensional. The worst thing that you can do against an offense is allow them to just be able to kind of to work the pace in their favor and to, really do whatever they want, right? Because if you're able to run the football, then play action games opens up, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're loading the box and now you have numbers outside. You need to keep those numbers in your favor. And the way you do that is to consistently tackle the ball carrier and not allow big gains. Like that is the consistency that I think that Notre Dame needs to get better at. Right. It's been good in spurts, but last year especially, it was a good defense last year. But the run defense wasn't great. It was a solid run defense. It was not nearly an elite defense in that regard. And I think it needs to be to beat the better teams on the schedule and hopefully the better teams that you're going to be facing if they make a playoff run again.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know he's not part of the show by talking, but this is a really good point, and I want to bring it up. Brian says Notre Dame was more disruptive last year than it has been in previous years, just gave up too many big runs because of assignment and technique mistakes. And that's 100% accurate. Guys were either over pursuing or they weren't making the play when they were in position to make the play. And that led to big plays. And when you do that, you're not going to be ranked with the top of the country in run defense. You're just not. And I think that Notre Dame had good players last year. They had good, solid players, right? I mean, J.D. Bertrand led the team in tackling. He wasn't even supposed to be a starter last year, right? I mean, and I think that Jack Kaiser did a good job. He's not Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and anybody that expect him to be that is fooling themselves. He's going to play that position differently than JOK did, but I thought he played well, but he needs to take another step, right? And moving JD inside and bringing in Marist, well, you just got a ton better across the board just because you bring in Marist and you've slid JD over where I think it's a more natural fit for him in the middle than it was on the outside. So I think that's a big thing. So I think they have taken the linebacking crew, and I think the linebackers have gotten better. And I think that's going to be a big key to the run defense. Not only have they gotten better, but I think they're also deeper. The depth at linebacker, and that's going to be one of the challenges, in my opinion, another question mark that I have since we're talking about run defense. We just got done talking about Al Golden. How is he going to use these linebackers? Because he's got a ton of talent in that room. I mean, a ton of talent. What's the sub packages going to look like? Who's going to get, is it going to be a 50-50 split? Is it going to be 80-20? What does that look like? Who's going to get time? All of those different things. I think that's a real question mark, and frankly, one that I'm excited to see the answer to because there's so much talent in that room. You don't have to keep the same three guys on the field the entire game because you have so much depth, and there's not really a drop-off from 1 to 2. Or if there is a drop-off, it's not very much, right? So I think just the maturation process of the linebackers and then the shifting and moving guys around, having Marist be healthy, I think that those are massive improvements, and I think that is going to make the run defense that much better.
Vince, and one thing that Brian said that I completely agree with is that this was a disruptive defense last year, because one thing that was a huge philosophical shift, and I'm going to get to the linebackers, but like a huge philosophical shift is this is a one-gapping penetration style defense, right? Like they are trying to create a lot of penetration in the backfield and a lot of havoc. And with that, you're taking a little bit chances sometimes, right? Like you still want gap integrity and you still want to be fundamentally sound. But when you are that aggressive style defense, you are taking some chances at times.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you absolutely are. And I think that the biggest thing for me is that I think you had last year the defensive linemen to take advantage of taking those chances, because a guy like Isaiah Foskey, for instance, right? We talk about him all the time with the length that he has.
Right.
If Isaiah Foskey takes a bad angle, he can still make a play because he's so long and athletic, right? Jason Amalola's got pretty good length for his position. If he's not in the perfect spot, he can still make a play. Yeah. Those guys are good. I mean, Howard Cross is a good athlete. Jacob Lacey's a good athlete. Absolutely. Justin Adamalola is a good athlete. Like they have good athletes and or length everywhere across the line. So that makes the margin for error a little bit higher. Like those guys can make plays sometimes, even when they're not in the best position. Linebacker was different last year, to your points.
Yeah.
J.D. Bertrand, good football player.
Sure.
I think he's going to be a really good Mike linebacker for this team now that Marist Liufau's coming in. Not the longest guy of all time. Right. I mean, he's got shorter arms. He's right around 6'1.5", whatever he is. He's not a huge guy as far as the height and length aspect of the position. good athlete functionally. Drew White was the exact same. I'm pretty sure I remember Drew White had sub 30-inch arms. Like, he's not a long guy at all. Good athlete, but not an incredibly long guy. Jack Kaiser, same deal. Like, not an incredibly long guy. Good athlete, but not an incredibly long dude. So those guys naturally have a smaller margin for error. If they're not in the right spot, they're going to miss more tackles because they're just not going to be in the proper position. I like JD moving to Mike because I think that increases his margin for error. He's going to play in less space, which is good for him.
Yes.
He's a physical kid, gets downhill. I think it's going to be fantastic. Maris Loifau, that kid has range, he has length, and he has explosiveness. There is not many plays that he's not going to be able to get to from pursuit. Now, he needs to be a technically sound football player in the way he approaches the game,
absolutely,
the angles he takes, but he has the athleticism and the length to make a lot of plays that he probably shouldn't make.
Right.
And then Jack Kaiser, a year in the weight room, a year getting bigger, a year, just playing the position and getting more natural at it. You're going to hope that he's able to kind of take a next step up, because I agree, he was a solid to good football player last year, but he still has a higher ceiling to get there, right? Because he's a better athlete than I think he plays like sometimes.
Agreed.
And then after that, I mean, you got Prince Kali, length, athleticism. You got a guy like a Junior Toya Lamaka, length and has some athleticism. You got guys like Jalen Sneed working at Rover, who's got length and athleticism. There's a lot more length and athleticism on this second level, and the one guy that was your best linebacker last year that does not have the length or athleticism, you're moving to a position that is better suited for a guy that doesn't have as much length.
Exactly.
Right? So I think the biggest difference between this team last year and this team this year is that the second level is going to make a lot more plays on the football. And I think there's going to be less missed tackles just because I think you increase the margin for error on the second level.
I completely agree. And Chris Davison has a great comment here about JD. So JD Bertrand had me as an emotional roller coaster. He always put himself in a position to make a play. And while he made a lot of them, he missed the important ones. He is so close to being a game wrecker. And to your point, that's a really good point, Chris. And to Ryan's point, being in the middle now, I think he makes more of those plays because he's got less space to operate in, which is good for him. He's smart. He is always around the football, just needs to make those plays. And I think moving inside, it fits him better. He's going to make those plays now because he's got other guys around him too. They're going to be making plays on the outside. I think one of the issues, and I don't want to get too X's and O's in here, but like one of the issues that Notre Dame had at times was setting the edge. They were coming down and they wouldn't break down and they wouldn't set the edge properly. And then that would be a big play. And that is a product of playing with your hair on fire, right? And going and 100 miles an hour and not breaking down, right? That's what that is. And you can see where that could be a problem this year. But as you said, when you're longer and more athletic, you can make some of those plays when you're a little bit out of position. And I think that is going to be more of a case this year than it was last year. Guys are going to be screaming into the backfield, but they got to make those plays in the backfield. They didn't make a lot of those plays, or they didn't make some of those plays, and they were amplified by the fact that they were in big situations. They were in the Fiesta Bowl, for example. There was a couple times where they had the quarterback dead to rights, and he was able to get out of it and scramble for a big play. Those were game-changing moments, no doubt about it. And so I just feel like the way that the second level is set up now, the first level I'm not even worried about. People are talking about undersized defensive linemen.
Well, the thing about
worried about them.
Yeah, the thing about that, Vince, is I always talk to Brian about like overcompensating traits, right? And because like they're not wrong. I mean, Jacob Lacey is a smaller defensive tackle.
Absolutely.
Howard Cross is a smaller defensive tackle, but they're both really good athletes, right? So like that can make up for some of that lack of length or size, right? Like you need one or the other. If you have both, then you're Isaiah Foskey, right? Like then you have everything in the world. And I also think, to your point, I'm especially not worried about the defensive line because I think it even got longer and more athletic than it was last year, right? Because you returned your two best defensive linemen. Isaiah Foskey's back. Jason Adamalola is back in the middle. Right. You also have, although Kurt Hinish was a good football player for Notre Dame, I would argue that both Howard Cross and Jacob Lacey are more athletically gifted players as far as tangibly on the field, right? Like functional athleticism. And then Myron Tagovailoa Amosa was a really good football player for Notre Dame, But the fact of the matter is that you replaced Myron, who was 6'2.5", 33-inch arms, solid all across the board from a length perspective. Now you're changing him with a 6'5", 285-pound Riley Mills, who has length for days, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
You even got longer and more athletic on defensive line, which was already a strength for you, in my opinion. That's not even counting guys like Justin Adamalola, who has solid length for the position. Alexander Ahrensberger, who's an incredibly long player. Nana Osafo-Mensah's got solid length. He's got as much length as at least Myron Tungavailoa-Amosa did last year, right? So, yeah, I think that the defensive line even got more impressive in those regards, but they didn't have to really. Like, it was a really good defensive line last year. The fact that that may have even upgraded, and the fact that I think the second level is going to be a whole lot better, I have a lot of optimism that this team is not going to miss nearly as many tackles, and they're also going to make some tackles that they just could not do last year.
Right. Absolutely agree with you. The depth of defensive line is so solid, and they're going to be able to move guys around. That's the other thing that I think people are forgetting. Yeah. Cross and Lacey are, first of all, they're not going to be on the field at the same time. So that's one thing, right? It's going to be one guy at a time, I would imagine, because Jason's going to be playing the other position. And so the way that they're going to move guys around and they're going to bump guys down and they're going to do some different things, I'm just not that worried about those guys being a little bit undersized. You know what I mean? That doesn't, it's low on the list of my worries. Let's put it that way. Because of the way the linebackers I expect to play and because of the depth at defensive line and moving guys around, taking a guy from a big end position, putting him at defensive tackle and bringing in somebody else, that's how I feel like they're going to do it to minimize the lack of size on the inside. Now, will they be playing? Yeah, they're going to play, but I don't think it's going to be a huge problem.
I agree. And someone even just said, I think it was David Knight that said that Jason Onye is another guy inside who, if either Jason Onye or Gabriel Rubio break out this year as a nose tackle, or both of them, then now we're talking about two guys that are 6'5" with good length and 290 plus pounds. So there's even more upside to this defensive line, which is just pretty crazy when you really think about it.
I know, because the depth at defensive line has been kind of the saving grace for Notre Dame over the past few years with Mike Elston as defensive line coach, right? That hasn't changed. I mean, they have a ton of depth, but I think that depth has gotten more athletic. I think that's the difference about the depth. I think they're more athletic now. So that in and of itself, you don't necessarily need a 350-pound, clogger of space. That's not, I don't feel like that's how Notre Dame is going to play their defense anyway, because that's a different style of defense. You know what I mean? They don't necessarily need that. If they had that guy who was like super athletic and was demanding triple teams and everything else, okay, I get it. But that's not really who they're going after either. On the recruiting trail, that's what I meant. Like that's not really who. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like they're going after that massive, block out the sun kind of guy these days.
No, they're going more towards they value length, right? But we think of like it's committed to Notre Dame that's like 6'4.5" and 275 pounds right now. Like that's more. They want those one gapping type of defensive tackles. Like a Jordan Davis would be great to have at Notre Dame. I'm not going to say like he wouldn't, but like that's not what they're targeting. Like that style, that to your point, like they don't care as much about the true nose that is going to take up two gaps, and like that's not their system. They're not a two gapping system. They want a guy that can split a gap and can create havoc in the backfield. Exactly. And now you have linebackers that can also, in theory, clean up any mess that happens.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a really good way of putting it. That was good way to bow that one up, tie it up. Very well done, sir. So the next point that we want to make about the questions and situation, and somebody brought it up that's why we have such good people in the chat. Kyle Berry, and I'll bring it up. I got to give credit where credit is due. Kyle Berry says good points. Very excited to see the front seven, as are we. Much bigger concerns about the secondary, starters, and depth. That is a fair statement, Kyle. We are right there with you, because the next thing we were going to talk about is the cornerback and safety position opposite the standouts. Look, we know Brandon Joseph is going to be an All-America caliber safety. I know that Cam Hart is going to be an All-America style or caliber corner. But what happens on the other side? That is a question mark, a question that we still need answers to, because I think depending on the day we're talking about it, Ryan, there's a different answer for who's going to start at the other safety. And while I think it's a little bit more clear as to who's going to start at the other corner, the question mark for me is what does the depth look like at that corner that pushes that starter? Because that is the biggest key for me. If Clarence Lewis wins that corner job, and I think he's in the pole position to win it at the moment. We haven't seen fall camp yet. I think he's in the pole position, but are the guys behind him, the Jaden Mickeys of the world, the Barneses of the world, et cetera, are they pushing him to hold on to that job and playing better than those guys in order to keep that job? I think that's the bigger question for me at corner. So what are your thoughts on the corner and the safety positions opposite Joseph and Hart?
Yeah, I mean, starting with corner, me and Brian talked about this last week, Vince. We were talking about some of the key position battles, obviously, on the defensive side of the football. And I mean, I think cornerback opposite of Cam Hart's maybe the highest, right? Like that position is something that we need to figure out, or Notre Dame needs to figure out. And I think the biggest thing for me is if Clarence Lewis does win the job and is the, back to back 3 years now of a valuable contributor to this defense, it needs to be because he was the best of very good room or a good room. Guys that I need the Ryan Barnes of the world, the Philip Rileys, the Jaden Mickeys. Like I need those guys to push a Clarence Lewis and Clarence Lewis to also push back and say, not yet. This is still me. Right. And if that happens, then I feel great about it because then you created depth. You have your guy that took a step forward and you're in a good spot. If Ryan Barnes takes a big enough leap and Clarence Lewis maybe takes a small leap, but Ryan Lewis just clears him, then that'll be okay too, because either way you pushed one to being, to the point of this is a battle, right?
Absolutely.
I do not want this to be a situation though where Clarence Lewis wins that starting spot because he is just he's the most experienced player and nobody took a step forward. If that happens,
that's a problem.
It's absolutely.
And you're going to see it real quickly against Ohio State. You're going to see that problem manifest itself really fast. And
100%.
If we're getting word that, well, he's there because that's, process of elimination, that's who we got. That's good. And that's the words that we're hearing out of camp. Like, well, nobody's really stepped up. So he's the returning starter. He's going to get it.
Yep.
I will be changing my tune really fast as to how Notre Dame plays against Ohio State.
100%. I mean, because it's going to be no easy breaks against Ohio State, right? It's like you either have to cover Jackson Smith and Jigba, or you have to cover Marvin Harrison Jr., or you have to cover Emeka, or you have to cover Julian Fleming. Like, it doesn't matter. They got dudes everywhere. So every position in the secondary is ultra important, especially the outside corner spots. Like, you need that position to take a step forward. And that was not even any points at Clarence Lewis. Like, I don't want any of these corners to win a job by default, right? Exactly. Like, I want them to win because they were the best possible corner. Because let's say hypothetically, Clarence Lewis takes a step forward, but Ryan Barnes takes a gigantic leap forward and he vaults him for the starting spot. Then, at least in my opinion, now Clarence Lewis can play football anywhere I want to play him, right? Like, he could play nickel. I think he can play outside. So now I can use him. I created depth in that situation.
Right.
And I think that, we're going to see it right out of the gate, to your point, right? Ohio State is not going to look at this team and say like, oh, wow, their corners aren't good, or the one corner maybe isn't playing well, and I'm not going to attack them for some reason, right? Like, you're going to take advantage of where your advantages are, obviously. So if they're not playing good football in the secondary, we'll know about it very early on in the season. Yes. Now, there's always exponential growth, right? Like, by the end of the season, I'm sure it'll be a whole lot better, but it's very important. The biggest game of the year, and that we know of right now, is game one. Like, that is the most important game. Literally, in a hypothetical situation and in real life, this is the most important game for Notre Dame. The best opponent that is on the schedule right now, as we see it, and the first game of the season, the next game, right? So in every layer, Ohio State is a big measuring point, and it is a big opportunity for Notre Dame. And the quarterback spot, I think, is going to kind of be a big tell of this game. If you come out of the game and you're like, Cam Hart handled business and the other cornerback spot played well, or at least didn't hurt us, then I think you feel good about where you were as a team. And then you have also the cornerback spot that I just spent a lot of time on, but then the other safety spot is one that, Brandon Joseph, I expect to be a star. We both saw him in spring, and I think that we were both very impressed by the caliber of athlete he is, the communicator he is, and just the ball skills he has. He has a propensity to just be around the football at all times. So he's going to make his plays, as he always does. My biggest question mark is, I went into spring like, wow, Ramon Henderson, Xavier Watts, whoever wins the starting spot, I'm good, man. And then you have depth with Houston Griffith and DJ Brown and Justin Walters. And like, that's dope, man. That's a whole lot of talent in one safety position. But you left the spring, and let's be very honest about it, that Ramon Henderson did not take the leap forward. Xavier Watts had moments, but he was at times like you just didn't see him do much, right? Like there was just some visible absence for whatever reason. So now you're in a spot where who is the other safety? There's going to be a lot of competition for that other spot.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest about this. Brandon Joseph makes it a whole lot easier on that safety next to him. He does.
No
so
doubt.
A lot of they're going to want that spot, obviously. I think there's going to be a rotation, but either way, you need a couple of these guys to step to the forefront because that position is very up in arms right now. You can tell me right now that Ramon Henderson goes to the spring and into the fall, and he runs away with it. I'd be like, I would believe you.
Yeah.
If you told me told me the same thing about Xavier Watts, I would believe you. If you told me both of them did not take a step forward and it's DJ Brown or Houston Griffith, I would also believe you. Like this thing could go in so many different directions. But again, I don't want one of the veterans to win this by default. If DJ Brown, for instance, or Houston Griffith or whoever wins this, or Justin Walters wins this starting spot, I need it to be because they are playing great football.
Yes.
Like that needs to be the end-all, be-all for this conversation. So question marks in the secondary, plenty of talents. It's just about, can you get them up to par to be able to go toe-to-toe with the best wide receiver core in college football on September 3rd.
Absolutely. And look, we've talked about this in the past before too, Brian and I. When you're an offensive coordinator, you're looking at the defensive tape, you're picking out, okay, who's the guy we want to pick on? Like, where's the weak link? Well, if it's not going to be Cam Hart, so it's going to be whoever's playing opposite Cam Hart, from the cornerback position, and it's going to be whoever's playing opposite Brandon Joseph. So those guys are going to get tested early, and they're going to get tested often in game one. We're going to find out really fast if they're up to the task. And, I kind of anticipate at least one big play being made, to be honest with you. One big play is not going to lose you the game, but I anticipate that they're going to go after those guys. And the percentages of the more you go after those guys, the chances of you connecting on one it gets greater, right? So it's going to be interesting. They're going to get tested. Those are huge question marks right now. And at the safety position, I think you rattled off 5 or 6 guys opposite Brandon Joseph. They're only going to rotate 4 total. Sure. So they're battling for a 2-deep spot, really, of all those guys. And it's going to be interesting to see who the odd man out is. If Xavier Watts is the odd man out, does he stay on defense? Does he go back to offense? I think maybe that ship has sailed, but I think those questions are legit. Does he stick around Notre Dame? And you can add player here, you know what I mean, in that blank. Like whoever is on the outside looking in of that 2 deep, how much longer are they going to stick around? Because I think there is talent there, but somebody is going to be out there. Somebody's going to be on the outside. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the safety spot lands and how the corner spot lands. There's no question. It's a legit question moving into fall camp to see how things go. One thing we get to see on Friday during the full practice is, yes, it's just helmets, but you're going to be able to.
There, Vince?
Oh,
yeah. Be there?
Oh,
yeah. Nice.
Oh, yeah. Cannot wait. Wait. But the one thing we're going to be able to see, you're not going to see any hitting, you're not going to see anything like that, but you're going to see one-on-ones. You're going to see probably some 7-on-7 type stuff. So you're going to see what the depth chart looks like going into the fall on the defensive backfield. That's going to be interesting. Okay, how are they starting coming out of the summer, and then where do they progress from there? So I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to report when it comes to the defensive secondary on Friday.
Sure.
Well,
and one layer too, Vince, that I forgot to mention from the cornerback position, especially, is that if this is a philosophical approach that Marcus Freeman has typically gone through the eyes of Al Golden, that's what I'm going to kind of phrase it as.
Sure.
Notre Dame's going to play a lot of man coverage. Do I think it's going to be exclusively? No. But when he was at Cincinnati, he made his living off of playing man coverage and being aggressive up front. So
Sure.
Notre Dame is going to have spurts where they're going to have to play man coverage, single high, two high, whatever against Ohio State. So it's a very important position.
Yep.
And I love it, man. I think that there's a big opportunity that's in front of these Notre Dame defensive backs. And I'm looking forward to seeing the growth that they have in the fall, because the talent is not the issue. It's just about putting it all together tangibly.
Right. Absolutely. So that's going to be a fun one to figure out, because I think there is talent there at both spots, and it's going to be a lot of fun. That one is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So the last point that we want to make is actually something that we did talk about a little bit earlier when we were talking about the linebackers, but it is, can Notre Dame finish better? So tackling in space, finishing off quarterbacks and running backs, behind the line of scrimmage, more turnovers, being more disruptive, that kind of, some of those intangibles, right? Being in the right place at the right time, but then completing that play that they didn't complete against Oklahoma State, for example, right? So do we think that Notre Dame is going to be able to do that, or do we think they're not going to be able to do that? But either way, that's a question mark going into the fall.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is something for me, Vince, where everything is, there's a lot of question marks when you're just kind of looking at the fact that, like, I think that one thing, from a spring practice to fall, is that you tangibly always want to see the steps forward from a positional perspective, from a competition perspective, from a technical perspective. We have to remember that we're talking about new coaches that just came in here that are completely new to the program and are trying to get their imprint on their position group, right? So like the spring is like time where, like, you shouldn't expect things to be perfect. It's that time where this is a test period for certain players and certain drills and certain techniques and all that good stuff. So I think that we're going to get a lot of answers in the fall, and we're going to see, you're going to see a little glimpse of it on Friday. You're not going to see a ton, but the fact that I just want to see exponential growth between what does it look like in the spring, what does it look like in the fall, so I can kind of predict what it's ultimately going to look like.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a legitimate question, because I think if you boil everything down last season on the defense, you boil it all down, I think the missing link, so to speak, from them being a really good defense to being elite defense was finishing off those plays, was finishing off those plays behind the line of scrimmage, was getting the key turnover, things of that nature. They were a really good defense last year. They were not elite. If they want to be elite, they have to make those different things happen. And I think from everything that we just talked about for the last hour, if they can do all of those things, if those questions get answered in a positive manner, I think the result of all of those questions in a positive way leads to them finishing plays and being more explosive and getting those turnovers and all of that. I think that'll be a product of all of those other things happening, because the way that the philosophy of this defense is disruption, and it's making plays in the backfield and all of that. So if they're, gap sound and their integrity is good and all of those different things, then the rest of it will fall into place. The rest of it comes with the territory. So it's one of the things I love about this defense. You have to be disciplined, but you get to play, man. You get to play and use your athleticism to your advantage. And I think that's exactly what this team is going to do.
Yeah. To make plays, man, you need two things. You need to be an athlete, and you need to have good technique, right? And I don't think the athleticism is any question on this team. Like, I was talking to Brian about this yesterday, Vince. This defense is going to be one of the fastest ones I've ever seen at Notre Dame. I mean, if we're being honest.
Agreed.
Foskey can run. Defensive lineman we've already talked about can run. Maris Loifel can run. J.D. Bertrand at Mike can run. Jack Kaiser can run. Cam Hart can run. Brandon Joseph can run. All these guys can run. It's all about now making it perfect from a technical perspective. If you can, Notre Dame has the potential, in my opinion, to be a top 5 defense in college football. Like,
absolutely.
I think the talent is there. I really do. It's just all about now perfecting athleticism to practical approach. And I think that we can see it this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's going to conclude our talk about the defense and the questions that need to be answered going into fall camp. We are going to, first, I will, don't go anywhere because we are going to stick around. So don't go anywhere. But for those of you that are listening on the podcast, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that fun stuff. And we will have another fun topic tomorrow, but that is going to do it for this topic. Now we're going to jump into our mailbag topic. And the mailbag is always so much fun. It's not Friday, but it's still a mailbag. I've been starring questions as we've gone along. So if you've got questions, please throw them in and we will star them and we will try to get to all of them as we go here. But there's a lot of really good questions in here, Ryan. I'm really looking forward to kind of tackling some of this. We do have a couple of super chats that I want to get to first. Ryan Loftus, thank you very much for the super chat. Bama just claimed the number 123 recruiting class. I believe it's because the tight end from Ohio State flipped to Alabama. I think that probably put them in the top spot, possibly. I thought I saw that Notre Dame was in the top spot earlier today, but maybe that's
it depends. It depends what platform you're looking at.
All right.
It's like, one Notre Dame is number 2, and then there's 2 others that are number 1. And different rankings and consensus board versus composite.
Gotcha.
And it's a lot of back and forth.
Gotcha. Well, his question is, do you think that they're a lock for the number 1 class with 4 players having a 5-star ranking in their class?
I don't think it's a lock. I was talking to someone about this last night, and I was looking at a bunch of players that are still heavy consideration for Alabama, and that's not counting committed players that they may potentially flip. If they flip a couple highly recruited players, then maybe this conversation completely changes. But based upon where the board is right now, I still think that it's going to be a very close race between Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State. Like, I don't think there's a front runner for the number 1 spot. I think that it's going to be a really close call. I think that it could be one where there's not a ton of separation at the top either. So can I just say this, Vince? And I was talking a little bit about this, Brian, yesterday, and I actually texted him half jokingly about like writing an article about Alabama fans for a second. I respect Alabama so much. I really do. I respect Nick Saban to the unlimited degree. Great coach. Argument for the greatest of all time.
Absolutely.
Yes. National championships, recruiting. He does it all, man. He's a great, great, great coach, and he's turned in Alabama into a dynasty.
Yep.
But Alabama can be beaten on the recruiting trail. Can we get off our high horse for a second?
Right.
Alabama is this undefeatable tidal wave of recruiting. Do they win their fair share of recruits? Absolutely. That's how they win, right? Like, they have good coaches and they have great players, and that's how they win football games, obviously. But just because Alabama's knocking hard at the Keon Keeley door does not mean that Keon Keeley is fully going to answer that door, okay? And I know people are going to say, well, he went on a visit and blah. Yes, I get it. And if you want more insight into it, boards.irishbreakdown.com. But people, I literally had someone message me yesterday and say, Keeley's gone. Like, Alabama's coming for him. I'm just like, and?
Yeah, because Alabama's going for him doesn't mean he's going to go. Like,
Alabama just got Caleb Downs. They just got the defensive lineman out of Alabama. The kid's name escaped me. Notre Dame was recruiting him for a little bit, and then Hunter Osborne. Just like, So he's not. They were making this big deal. Oh man, Alabama's continuing the streak. I'm like, they got an in-state defensive lineman. Like, why? How would they? Anyway. I'm sorry. Right. I'm getting a little sidetracked here. All I'll say is this. Notre Dame, I don't think is going to back down from Alabama. I know they're not going to back down from Alabama. I don't think they're worried about any other school. I think that they are just playing their game and they are targeting the players that they want to target. I know Notre Dame has the target on their back because they had the number 1 class in pretty much every platform for a very long time. And Keon Keeley's a guy that just went down to Alabama for a visit. I get all that. But you also have to understand that this staff, in my opinion, is a very competitive staff.
Oh, yeah.
And just because it's Alabama doesn't mean that they're just going to stop recruiting Keon Keeley and just let him flip, right? Like, it's not – is it going to be a battle to keep him? Of course. He's a 5-star top 10 player in the country.
He's arguably the number 1 player in the country, depending on how you look at number 1 players in the country,
yes.
okay?
Yes.
People are going to come after him. It's called big boy recruiting. Like, if you want to play with the big boys, it goes down to the wire. It always does.
Yep. And I just really wanted to say that because, again, full respect, Alabama. They're going to have a top 2 to 3 class in the 2023 cycle, as they always do, right? They had that string of number 1 classes for the longest time. Like, they are a dominant recruiting program.
Of course.
But let us now move past the fact that you don't compete with Alabama. Can we stop that, please? This is not recruiting down a different aisle anymore. It's not that anymore. Notre Dame got an early commitment from a premier elite level prospect, and it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to flip to Alabama just because Nick Saban started calling and he took a visit. Okay. There's a lot of things behind the scenes here, and we'll disclose information as we see fit and as we can. All I'm saying is that in order to be the best where Notre Dame wants to get, you have to compete with the best. And guys, you have to get used to this. It's going to happen. You're going to compete to keep guys like Peyton Bowen and Keon Keeley in your class. It's going to happen. But why were you shying away from that competition? I know Notre Dame staff certainly isn't shying away from it.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that some of the fans out there, not the ones on our board because they're awesome, but like it's a good thing some of our fans aren't recruiting these kids for Notre Dame because, oh, you got an Alabama offer. We're out. You know, like, guys, just relax. Everybody relax. Take it down a notch and relax. And don't worry about all the clickbait that's out there for all, about all of this. That's just what it is. It's clickbait. So I will say that. And if you want the best intel possible, check out Irish Breakdown, the boards.irishbreakdown.com. You're going to have all the information that you need, and you won't be freaking out as much, and you'll be able to get a good night's sleep. Okay, so go check that out.
Can I say one more thing, Vince? Because I just saw a comment, and I'm not going directly at Steve Kerr here, but he said, "You're missing the point, guys. Alabama will dip into the NIL and leave Notre Dame in the rears." I know Keeley's uncle wants him to look around. Steve, just because NIL is now a pretty way of saying that you're going to pay players, this is not the first time that Alabama has paid players. I hate to break this to you. It's not the first time that any school has paid players. He had literally, Keon Keeley specifically, has committed to Notre Dame. And if you think that he wasn't getting offered money before now, then you are completely mistaken, my friend. Okay. I get the NIL stuff. It is a conversation. It is a talking point. It is a strategy, 100%. But this is not the first time Keon Keeley has gotten an offer. All right. This is not the first time that Alabama has forked over money to a recruit or offered to fork money over to a recruit, as much as Nick Saban wants to say it is. Okay. So can we please leave the NIL stuff out, because that's already been presented to Keon Keeley. As of now, he's committed to Notre Dame. Thank you.
There you go. Again, not every kid is looking for a sack of money. That's just not the way it goes. I mean, So that also has to be said. Guys are coming to Notre Dame for the long picture, the long game, not the blank check up front. Okay. So, anyway. Yeah. I'm with you on that one. 100%.
I'm sorry. I'll round up after these comments, man. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love it.
Vince, we had a great conversation, man, talking defensive football, and I see a Keon Keeley's name like 17 times in that chat. I'm like, man, come on.
It's never going to go. It's not going to go away till February. You know that. Yeah. It's not going to go away, which is why I'm advocating for an August National Signing Day. Okay. August and December. Those are your two national signing days. This isn't 1987 anymore. You don't need a signing day in February because back in the day, most of the recruiting was done from the end of the season to February. That's when you did your recruiting. The biggest weekend at Notre Dame was the banquet at the end of the season. All the recruits would come in for it. 2 weeks later, you have National Signing Day. That is not the case anymore.
Brian talked about that yesterday, man. It makes a lot of sense if you did that split signing day with those time frames. It would make a lot of sense. It really would.
August, December. And I can tell you a ton of guys are going to want to sign in August just to get it done with before their senior year. They don't have to worry about it. It just is done. So anyway.
Absolutely.
I'll get off my soapbox. We had one more super chat from Randy Hernandez. Thank you very much, Randy. He says you guys are forgetting about the most important defensive position. That's defensive coordinator Al Golden. Randy, we did not forget about Al Golden. We led off the show with Al Golden. So make sure you check out the beginning of the show. And we wouldn't have led off with him if we didn't think he was the most important. So we agree 100%. With you wholeheartedly. Randy, thank you for the super chat, but definitely check out the beginning of our show, and you will see everything that we had to say about it.
Yep. Thanks, Randy.
Yep, absolutely. Bill Walsh, who do you think will lead the team in tackles this year? I'm going with Bertrand. He was thrown in the deep end last year and played well. Will be even better now that he's at middle linebacker.
You can sell me on JD Bertrand because I mean a lot of thing is kind of cycled to the middle linebacker, but I'm going to
Sure.
take Maris Loifau because I think that just the ability he has to work in pursuit and the tackle radius he has, I think he's going to make a lot of plays, man. Like not just in the box, working in the perimeter, in coverage reps. Like I just think that he's a player that you do not take off the field, and I think that he's going to get to a lot of plays. So as long as he's healthy and he's the player that I think he is, then I'm going to go with Maris Loifau pretty comfortably. I wouldn't say it's like a runaway, but like pretty comfortably.
Well, I mean, look, you can't go wrong with either one of those guys because the way the defense is set up, that filters it into the two inside linebackers, right? So Will or Mike are going to be the choice. It's just who do you think is going to have more? I also agree with you. I think Maris is going to be that guy because I think he's going to be a little bit more disruptive. He's going to be a little bit more all over the place as opposed to, excuse me, as opposed to JD. But that's the nature of the position too. So I will also go with Marist, but I think JD will be second. And I don't think it'll be close. And then the third one, I think, will be even further down. But I think those two are going to be right up there. I have to bring this one up because I started reading it in a very negative way. Chris Davison says, I got to call you out, Vince. I'm like, oh, great. What is this about? He goes, you're lying about signing up and getting a good night's sleep. I signed up yesterday and I was up until midnight on the board. So you're right, Chris. First of all, thank you for signing up. Really appreciate that. But you're right. There's so much good information. There's so much good intel. There's so much good conversation. You can get sucked into a black hole of the board.
Sure can.
No doubt.
Someone said on the board yesterday, Vince, that they were losing their mind following recruiting. And I just said, imagine covering it. It really is, man. Like I wake up at 5:30 in the morning every day. I go on the board and I'm just like, how are they already having this many great conversations? And then when I go to bed at like 10:30, because I'm an old man, I'm just like, geez, man, they're still going. They just don't stop. It's fantastic. I love it, man. It's a great community. It really is.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That's awesome. We do have another super chat from Mark E. Stewart. Thank you very, very, very much, Mark. He goes, you guys must live in some weird bubble if you think NIL is not a major factor. Everyone has a price. I'll let you answer that one first, Ryan.
I would just like, Mark, and this is all respect to you, sir. And first and foremost, thank you so much for the super chat. Yes. I really appreciate it. I know Vince really appreciates it. We all really appreciate it here. Who said that NIL wasn't a major factor? I just would like to start there, right? My question is for you, is that just because now we can label thing in NIL does not mean that this is the first time that money has been given, right? It is not, this is not the first time that money has been part of a recruitment, right? That's my major pushback. It's always been a factor. There's no doubt. And there are a lot of players,
right? I mean, it wasn't out in the open. I mean, that's sure. Anybody ever seen Blue Chips? That was in the early 90s. Okay. I mean, yes, it's a movie, but it's based on reality. Okay. It's always been around.
100%. Yep. No, you're fine. It's just a different label to your point now, right? Like you can say now that, this is NIL money, but like, you know what it is. Like, let's be honest with it, right? There's a lot of handouts out there right now, and we've seen it. It is a thing. And there are some people that are using NIL the very right way. And I'm in favor of NIL. I'm so in favor of players being able to make a profit off of their name, image, and likeness. I really am. But this is not the first time it's happened, Mark, to my point. And the other side of the point is that there's going to be some players that's all they care about, right? That's what their families care about. Absolutely. They want to make the quick buck. Sure. But those players aren't going to commit to Notre Dame anyway. That's one thing, right?
Right.
And then the other part of it is that Notre Dame players have the ability to make money.
Right.
They make money. I don't.
Who saw the video about the uniform unveiling? Everybody, right? The players involved in that video made money making that video. Okay.
Yeah.
That's an NIL opportunity. There's ways to make money while you're at Notre Dame. Again, it's the long game. It's not a blank check when you sign up. Okay. It's the long game. Notre Dame is a brand. Nobody's going to argue that. Nobody's going to argue that Notre Dame is a well-known brand. If you are successful at the University of Notre Dame, you will get opportunities in the NIL marketplace. There's no question about it. So, yeah.
And all I'll say is like, if it was a player that is making a commitment and has not committed to Notre Dame, right? Like they're in between, NIL, if it's important to them, can absolutely be the difference maker for making a commitment to one school or the other, right?
Right.
And for a lot of players, it could be the main criteria for making a decision. I understand that. It's a very big factor. To your point, Mark, it is 100%. My point is that, like, specifically in a player, and I'm going to keep using Keon Keeley as an example because that's the only person everyone wants to keep talking about. And so, like, let's do it, right? Keon Keeley, Mark, do you think that Keon Keeley wasn't offered money until right this second? Is that what you think? Because I can assure you that is not true, sir. It is not. It's not. But to your point, I apologize if I made it sound like NIL wasn't a major factor, because it is.
It
It's
is a
100% a major factor.
No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about it. And guess what? Notre Dame recruits are going to be involved in NIL. They are. It's just different. It's just different. That's what I'll say.
Yep.
All right. Back up to the top here from Matthew Maple. What's everyone's thoughts on Ricky Collins decommitting, Mr. Recruiting Analyst?
Yep. So he's out of the state of Louisiana. He was committed to Purdue for a while.
Solidly for a while there, too.
It seems, Vince, I don't know if you saw the decommitment post he made, though, where he basically said, like, thank you to some parts of the coaching staff. And he said, you know, for whatever, this is me paraphrasing, but he basically said that they had kind of stopped talking to him, really. Like, it just, like, conversations and communication had just kind of stopped abruptly. So
that's bad on them, because Ricky Collins is he's a good quarterback.
He's a really good quarterback. So the first question that people are going to ask is, you know, he was going to go to a school in Indiana anyway, right? So, like, Notre Dame going to be involved there. To my knowledge, and from what me and Brian have talked about, he was on Notre Dame's radar before, but I don't imagine he's going to be on moving forward here as of right now. Can that change? Sure. I think it can, and I would absolutely pick up the phone because I think that he's a good football player. I like Ricky Collins a ton. Everything I'm hearing and seeing, I'm going to guess this is a LSU move, right? Like, I think that that's where this one is trending right now. Could Notre Dame get involved? I think so, but I don't think that it's in the cards right now. Right now, Notre Dame has its eyes set now that Austin Novosad made his recommitment to Baylor.
Yeah.
I think that this is a Kenny Minchie type of conversation right now. I think that is their main target on the board for Notre Dame.
Agree. There was a 1-2 situation there, and there wasn't really, from what I can gather, there isn't really a 3-4-5 kind of. I mean, I'm sure they've got names on the board and guys that they're talking to, but those were the two main guys that they kind of targeted after the other guy left and went someplace else. So those were the main two guys. And so if they don't hit with Kenny Minchie, then maybe they go back to the drawing board a little bit. Maybe they reach out to Ricky Collins. But look, Ricky Collins isn't decommitting from Purdue if he doesn't already have a pretty good idea of where he's thinking about going. That's my opinion. It's not like he called me up and told me that.
Usually the case. Yeah. I would say you're usually right about that. Yep.
Yeah. So, but obviously he was frustrated about something at Purdue too, which is very interesting. You would think you got a guy like that who would be a generational style quarterback for Purdue. Purdue. I'm going to hold on to that guy, but kind of dropped the ball, I guess.
Yeah, I would love to hear the backstory, man. I hope someone puts out a story, or if Ricky takes you behind the scenes. Like, why would you stop talking to that kid? That's just so weird. It's such a weird situation.
Absolutely. Another super chat here from Kyle Berry. Thank you very much, Kyle. Switching gears here. Stadium atmosphere at Notre Dame. What can Notre Dame do to keep opposing fans from taking over the stadium? For example, Georgia in 17, Cincinnati in 20.
Don't sell your tickets.
Don't sell your tickets to the opposing fans. I mean, that's what it is. And Frank, what can Notre Dame do? Win. I mean, win
product on the field.
Yeah, right. Better product. Win those big games, and then fans aren't going to be getting rid of the tickets that they don't want to watch the games because they will want to watch a winning team. Is Notre Dame a winning team? Yes, they are a winning team, but they are not an elite game winning team. Once they start doing that, once they start winning those elite games, which they have at least 2 of on the schedule this year, you're going to see our fans not want to give those tickets up. So a good product provides an opportunity for fans to stick around. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's easy. And I will also say they need to lower the ticket prices because they have priced out the local fan big time. big time.
100%.
It's not like back in the day when we were in high school and I would walk around the stadium and be able to buy a ticket for $20 and go watch the team. You know what I mean? Like that is, yes, I realize there's inflation and there's all of those different things, but it's almost impossible for the local fan to go watch a game. And those are your rabid fans. Those are the guys you want in the stadium.
You also have a national brand. So, I mean, like myself, for instance, right? Like I'm coming to the first home game against Marshall and I'm in New Jersey, right? So like I'm taking a plane that I got a good deal, Vince, like round trip $166, which is awesome. But I'm still spending 166 to get there and back. I'm still spending $80 on a ticket. I'm still spending X amount on a rental car for a couple days. I'm still spending X amount for a room in a hotel, right? So like those things add up. So even if you're not a local fan, to your point, that makes it super accessible, it's also the national perspective of people all around the country are Notre Dame fans. So you have to make it more attractive by, let's be a little more thoughtful about the prices of things. Let's make the atmosphere of the game day better. Let's make sure that the product that's on the field makes you want to come watch the game. Like, I mean, I went to the Cincinnati game last year and it was part of this question where it was just red everywhere, man. And it was like a great day and I had a lot of fun, but then you get to the game and it's just like, why is there more red in here than blue and gold? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So those are a few of the things though that I think can help for sure.
Nope, no doubt about it. Completely agree with that one. And Archer says the next time you come into town, you just crash on my couch. You probably wouldn't even notice you're here with all the kids. So come on down.
Well, I was about to say Vince has a lot of people in his household though, so I don't know if there's much room.
They probably wouldn't even notice you were here. So, but thank you for the super chat and all that fun stuff. So back to the top, Tyler Binge, Ryan, it's for you, buddy. Is there a reason that we don't hear about the special teams coach more often in recruiting? He seemed like a very charismatic coach and could be helpful, hopefully, to create a better relationship.
So Tyler, I feel like it's not mentioned as much in like the media sphere, but I've talked to a lot of recruits that talk about Coach Mason as far as like one of their first points of contact, right? So, I mean, specialists, you're not going to get many specialists. You're going to get a kicker every couple years to continue cycling that, a punter every couple years. And you don't really get players that are just strictly for special teams other than punter, kicker, long snapper, right? But I can guarantee you, especially in the 2024 class, there's a lot of players that I've talked to that say like, oh yeah, I talk to Coach Mason all the time. I talk to Brian Mason every week or every 2 weeks. So he's more involved than you think, but it's just the simple fact of like, he's not like Brian Mason's not going to be the main recruiter for Keon Keeley, for instance, right? He's not going to main recruiter for Drake Bowen. He's not a position coach in that sense. He's a coordinator of the whole special team. So it's kind of a little bit of a unique position, but I can guarantee that he does have definite responsibilities on the recruiting trails, and he does talk to a lot of kids.
Well, and I will also say that from a firsthand situation, he ran all the summer camps, or he was the face of all the summer camps, I should say. So every single summer camp that they had, whether it was the little kids, the special teams camps, the Irish Invade, all of that, he ran them. Like he was up in front. He was telling guys what to do. He was bringing them in. He was sending them to stations. He was doing all of those things. So he was the face of the program for the camps side of things too. And a lot of that during that time, coaches were out and about doing other things with recruiting and things like that. So, it's kind of somebody has to mind the store while, the coaches are out and about. Right. So that 100%. Was kind of his gig, and he did a really good job with that. I will say that. So Coach Mason's plenty busy. That's for sure. But you're right. If he's not the actual position coach, it's tough. He'll reach out to kids and he'll
unique.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that.
Vince, can I say that you were on point today, sir? You are running this show. I mean, you're like Brian Driscoll 2.0 right now.
Oh,
buddy.
That's a compliment right there.
That is.
Thanks, buddy. John A1, our buddy John, jumping in with a question. We always love that. Can you guys discuss sub packages? The speed rush is pretty common, but what about short yardage, etc.? Base, spread, defense versus 12 personnel, pro offense, defense. What would you project for Notre Dame's 22 RST? 22? I don't know. The package, I guess, 22. Let's call it that.
Yeah. John, I think that we should turn this one honestly into a full, coaching 101 type of thing, right? Like, because I feel like we can diagram so many cool things. I'll go over the basics real quick, right? So Notre Dame is a 4-2-5 base, right? So 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. They're going to have also moments where they're in a 3-man front. It's going to look more like a 3-3 stack type of look, or even a 3-2 to 3-2-6, right? Because you're going to get multiple defensive backs on the field. So now that the NFL, now that college football and the NFL are such heavily dependent on the passing game,
right?
You're seeing most teams now going to a sub package more often than not. I think last year in the NFL, and I know we're talking about college football, but the NFL, I'm pretty sure the Seattle Seahawks were the only team in the NFL that ran base defense more than 50% of the time. So the majority of the game now is sub package, and that is going down to the college football game. There's no doubt about it.
100%. There's guys in the booth. Their only job is to watch the sideline of the other team and see what personnel is coming on, so that they can get the others, the personnel that they've decided matches up the best, and get that personnel group on like that.
100%.
I mean, look, they stopped the game to allow personnel changes. That never used to be the case. So now that they do that, because I mean, you see the back referee, not the guy with the white hat, but the other guy who's in the back, he comes up, he'll literally not allow the snap to take place while the defense has a chance to sub based on what the offense did. That allows you to have more sub packages because of the rules. If you didn't have those rules, you wouldn't have as many sub packages, frankly. But that allows you to sub on and off based on what the offense is doing. So there's a bunch, to be honest with you, whether you're, like you said, put it in the speed rush, bring it in the nickel, bring it in a dime, whatever the case may be, there's more nowadays because the rules allow it, frankly. So teams do it. If they're going to allow you to do it, why would you not do it?
100%. And I mean, 4-2-5 is such a great defense. And, I think
it allows you to match up so much better without having to do sub packages.
It's so easy to substitute, Vince, because it's like I studied it so much when I was in high school, because I loved Gary Patterson and everything he did at TCU, and it's just like 4-2-5.
4-2-5, like
he is, and it's just like 4-2-5. You have that rover. Okay, the rover's kind of more of a linebacker, right? Let's take him out of the game. We're gonna put a nickel in, right? So then you're in your nickel, like that's easy, right? And then you take out another one of the linebackers. You leave your linebacker in because that's a dime linebacker, right? You have one linebacker on the field. The other linebacker's out, and you put another defensive back on the field. So at that point, you have a 4-1-6, right? At that point, right? So the 6 defensive backs is dime, 5 defensive backs is nickel. And John, usually, especially at Notre Dame, you're going to have a 4-man front. You're going to have a 3-man front at times. Goal line situations, you might see a 5-man front, just bringing up a linebacker on the line of scrimmage, or subbing out a linebacker to get another defensive lineman on the field. Or you might even see a 6-man front at times. Like that, you see that on goal line situations especially. So that's just briefly some of the things that you'll typically see from a sub package perspective and a goal line perspective. But again, I already wrote it down on my notepad here that I think that's a really good show that all of us could do, honestly, because all of us have coaching backgrounds. So that would be a lot of fun.
That would be a lot of fun. I know Brian would be all about that one for sure.
Yep.
Garen jumps in. He says, what is the over-under on the number of captains from the defensive side of the ball? I got 3.5, and I'll take the over. I don't think I see more than 2 on the offensive side of the ball.
That's interesting. So, I mean, Vince, I think where we should start here for Garen's question is, what defensive players do you think are included in his 4 that he's thinking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, right.
So Jason Adamalola is definitely going to be a captain, I think.
Foskey,
like that would be a
prediction.
That's
a great opportunity to be a captain.
Sure.
To be honest with you, Justin has a great opportunity to be a captain. I think he's from what I've heard, I think he's a leader on this team as well. So that's 3 from the defensive line alone.
Brandon Joseph, maybe.
I mean, All-American, definitely possible. You know, Cam Hart, I think, has an opportunity to be a captain. He's got leadership qualities about him. I'm trying to think from a linebacker. I mean,
I think it's
a leader, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll see as far as the defense or as far as linebackers are concerned. I don't see Maris. He's a first-time starter. I don't see him being a captain. You know what? I could see I could see Bo being a captain, more of like a special teams captain.
Right. I guess that's my biggest question is would he be your special teams captain or would he be one of the defensive captains? That's a good point.
I could see him being like the special teams captain. I mean, that's where he's made his mark. There's no doubt about that, right?
And me and Brian talked about the offensive side of the football the other day. I mean, guys like Jared Patterson came up. We talked a little bit about Michael Mayer, obviously. Avery Davis is a returning captain.
Yep.
So you would think that he would have another good shot there. So
that's 3 right there.
Garen, I would say, so now I guess we pick the over-under, 3.5. Would you take the under or over on that one, Vince, for defensive captains?
See, the other thing we don't know is how does Marcus Freeman feel about captains? Is he one of those guys that's just like handing out C's to everybody, or is he more like, hey, 2-1 and 2 on the other? I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take the under on the defensive side.
I think I'm also going to take the under just because I like you said, I want to see how many captains there are to begin with, right? If you tell me that there's 6 captains, then I consider the over here, especially if you count Bo as a defensive captain if he was picked.
I mean, yeah, I would call him defense.
Yeah.
So
it's a tough one. That's a good question though, Garen.
It's a really good question. And we're going to know, we're going to learn things about Marcus Freeman a lot, right? As different things happen, but captains is one of those things. That's a head coach thing, Not every head coach wants to have 8 captains because that's weird. I'm sorry, 8 captains is weird. I don't know. I used to like
2, man. I used to like 2, just an offensive and defensive captain. Yeah. That's it,
Exactly. I've never understood the multiplicity. I'll use that word again. Captains. It doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. It's an honor. It should, if something is an honor, in my opinion, it should be for a select group of people.
Sure. Well, I remember when I was in high school, I was a captain senior year, and I remember we always had 4 every single year. And sometimes it was less if there weren't 4 that were deserving, So it was an honor. Like if you made, like they would never go more than what they had, and 4 was the absolute limits, right? So I think so too, because I think that stuff really does matter. So I agree with you in that sense.
Absolutely. Kyle Berry with a question. Biggest question for Al Golden, the Notre Dame defense in game 1. Can Foskey, Adamalola, Mills, and company get the same type of pressure on Stroud that Michigan did with Hutchinson and Ajabo?
I think every concern that we have with the secondary right now, right? And we talked about the corner opposite Cam Hart and the safety position opposite Brandon Joseph and trying to figure those things out. I feel like, Kyle, that a great pass rush can help those things very early on, right? So I don't know if I would say it's the biggest question, but I would say that it would help everything. It would help quiet the questions, in my opinion, because I find it very unlikely, having watched Ohio State's offensive line and having watched our defensive line last year. And again, different seasons, so things can change.
Sure.
But I find it hard to believe that Notre Dame would just be completely quiet from a pressure perspective. Like, I think they're going to have some sort of pressure. I think the question in here is how good the secondary is going to be. That's the question. I think, if anything, the defensive line and the pass rush could be an answer to help the question, if that makes sense.
Right. No, makes perfect sense. Like it. David Lowe. Does anyone think that this team has a chance of being the best Notre Dame team in the last 25 years?
Wow.
So that's going back to 2007.
2000. What? Oh, wait.
Right?
No. 97. Yeah.
God, okay, I'm older. I'm younger than I thought. That's good. Yes, my math skills fail me. That's why I'm a PE teacher. But so yeah, since 1997. So we're going back a long ways.
So I mean, the best teams, right? And I know we do this game all the time. So you think, 2012, 2018, right? It was a good team.
I know that Brian likes a lot.
Yeah, the what was it? 2000 was it 2005? The Brady Quinn year? Or was it 2006?
He was 5'6". I mean, it was
5'6". Yeah,
those are the 2 years for him, I believe.
I
mean, could they be? They could be. If they go win a Final Four game, then they got a really good. That means they obviously are probably an 11-win team going in. That means they won their 12th game in the playoff, and they're playing for a national championship, and they're competitive in that national championship. There could be an argument made that they're the best team over the last 25 years. Because what have these teams accomplished? I look at it from an accomplishment standpoint, not necessarily. So if we're putting parameters on this question, are we talking just from a roster standpoint? Or are we talking about accomplishment standpoint, right? From an accomplishment, if they win something, then yes, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah. If they win a national championship, then yes, it's 100%, right?
Right.
Like, obviously, but I would say this, Vince. I think this is a little bit of a cop out to the question. I'll be very honest about this, David, but I think that this is the deepest Notre Dame team that they've had in a while from a full picture perspective. Because I think even a couple of those teams that we talked about, they had certain flaws to it, right? From a position group at the top, a position group from the depth perspective. I do think this team could be that good because they have a lot of depth. It's just, how good is Tyler Buckner? Can the offensive line figure it out? Can the defense be the standard that we think they can be? Like, there are a lot of question marks, but I think they have the talent to. Yes, sure. I think so. Yeah. Absolutely.
And somebody mentioned they haven't won a bowl game in that amount, or a New Year's Six type bowl game in that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if they do that, then as a team, they've accomplished more than any other team in the past 25 years. Okay. I mean, it's hard to argue that, right? So I think it's a really good question, David. Hopefully it will be, but we'll see what happens. Blaine Tiller, when Notre Dame defeats Ohio State in September,
Love it.
Who do you expect to be the ND defensive MVP?
It's a great question. I think if Notre Dame wins that football game, it's going to be because, and I would love to say Maris Loifau because that's my answer to everything, but it's not going to be this time. I think that if they are going to win the football game, it's because defensively, they put a lot of pressure on CJ Stroud.
Yes.
So I'm going to pick a defensive lineman. I am ultimately not going to go like completely off kilter here and pick like a Riley Mills for now. I'm going to go Isaiah Foskey because I think that we have seen him make big plays in big moments, and he is incredibly difficult to counteract. And I mean, he could be the difference between strip fumble that completely reverses momentum, or big play and big spot, a sack on 3rd and 8 at midfield, as time has kind of expired, whatever it is. I think Isaiah Foskey has a propensity to make those types of plays. So I'm going to say Isaiah Foskey is the defensive end.
He almost single-handedly won the game for Notre Dame against Oklahoma State.
Sure
did.
I
mean, got that big strip sack and everything. It gave them an opportunity to go down and win that game. Obviously, they didn't. That's not his fault. He makes big plays in big moments. And I agree with you. The way to beat Ohio State, or if they do beat Ohio State, is they have to get pressure on Stroud. You cannot just let him sit back there and pick you apart. You can't do it.
Right.
So I think that,
Oh, looks like we have some technical difficulties. Vince popped out. Vince is back. There he is.
And all of a sudden I saw somebody enter our studio and then I was gone. I don't know if I got kicked out or what.
They kicked you, man. They kicked
you. Right? But anyway, yes, I think Isaiah Foskey is the MVP if Notre Dame happens to win that game. That has to be the case. So
this is this is a great comment. The Death Star got Vince.
There's a lot of Death Star talk going on in the chat right now because somebody said that recruiting is dog eat dog and Alabama is the Death Star. And then I believe it was Brian that came in and said, or was it you that said the Death Star blew up?
I said that.
You said that. Okay. Which I thought was fantastic. And then, there would have been more Death Star references, which I think is hilarious in there.
Oh man,
well.
this one's good from Jay. The Bama infiltrating the IB network. Yes, it is the trolls coming, Jay. Yes. It's the trolls coming, man.
Oh, good stuff, everybody. Very, very good stuff. Let's see. We've got another one in here from DMND13. What specific position on defense is the most solid when looking at the 2 or 3 deep? I'm tempted to say Mike with JD, Bo, and Junior. Not necessarily the most talented, highest upside, but I think the most solid.
It's a good question. I think
very good question.
So I mean, like just top 2, I would say Viper, right? I mean, because you're looking at
Foskey and Adamiola.
Yeah, Justin Adamalola as the backup Viper. We're talking about him so much that like they need to find another role for him outside of just being the backup Viper, right? So
good point.
That's a 2. Mike is good. I think that's a good one. DM. I think that you're talking about JD, who just led your team in tackles. Bo Bauer, who's played a ton of football, and Junior Toya Lamaka, who was fantastic in the
Who are all
spring.
high on, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another good one. But I think I would go with Viper. I think that it's a 2 versus 3 conversation. But I mean, having Justin Adamalola as your backup Viper is a pretty darn good football player.
That's a really good one. Are we only talking? Yeah, we're only talking defense. So to be different, I will say Will, because I think, you've got a really good starter, obviously, in Marist, and then you've got Prince Collie behind him, who we're all very high on as well. And he seems to have gotten a little bit forgotten based on the awesome class that just came in at linebacker. But his maturation process from last year when he got on the field the first time and looked like a lost puppy to where he was playing with a lot of confidence there towards the end of the season when he would get in, I think he's going to be a really good backup. And I think we're going to feel really good when Marist comes off the field and Prince is in the game. So not that I disagree with Ryan, because I think that was a really good one, but I'll go ahead and say Will, just to be different.
I mean, you could also just couple the whole linebacker position together too, right? And then it's not even a conversation at that point.
Yes, you could. Yes, absolutely, you could. Next question from Blaine. He says, if both play to their potential and the defense plays well, who ends the season with more tackles, Foskey or Marist? I think this is an easy one.
Marist, yeah. Isaiah Foskey's going to make a lot of plays, there's no doubt, but a defense is structured to cycle to the second level, right? Like that's where your tackles get made. Right. So it's going to be Marist if everything is healthy. The more impactful plays, though, could be Foskey if you're talking about sacks, tackles for loss, forced fumbles, all that good stuff. But it's definitely Marist if we're just talking about pure tackle numbers.
Sure, absolutely. We are not Marshall. Vince and Ryan, what opposing teams this year have outstanding interior linemen that could cause problems for our smaller defensive tackles?
Oh, okay. So you ready for a brief breakdown, folks?
Yeah, I am, because I don't have much to go on here. I have not started looking at all of the competition, so you hit it, buddy.
Yeah, so I'll just work down a couple of the better interior offensive linemen on the schedule. I think at a couple of schools. Ohio State has a guard that is supposed to start this year. I think his name is Donovan Jackson, who is a redshirt freshman, who I've been told by a couple different people that he's a dude. He has not played much. I don't even know if he played at all last year, but he is a redshirt freshman. He's supposed to be the left guard, I believe, or the right guard. I can't remember which one he is, but they have the Jones kid coming back at the other guard, who's fifth-year senior, not a great football player, but I heard Donovan Jackson is a dude. Ohio State also has a center named Luke Whippler, who I like a ton. He is a younger kid, only going to be a redshirt sophomore, but I thought he really kind of steadied that offensive line last year. So I like Whippler. If Donovan Jackson is what kind of people are talking about already, Ohio State may have a surprisingly good interior. Maybe not game one, but I think you could have some nice things down the road. BYU has a kid named Clark Barrington, who is an offensive guard who plays next to their left tackle, who's a really fantastic player, whose name is escaping me for whatever reason right now, but he's a really good player. Clark Barrington's a former walk-on, really physical football player. The rest of BYU's interior, though, is not as experienced as Clark, but he's been played a lot of football, so he should be a good football player for them. Clemson has nobody. I don't even know why I mentioned them for a second. Boston College did have Christian Mahogany, but he is hurt for the season. You should not expect him back for the Notre Dame game. He probably would have been the best interior offensive lineman on the field for any team that Notre Dame would have played this year. And then USC has two players, Andrew Voorhees and Brenton Nalon is their center. Voorhees is getting a lot of preseason pub. Good football player. I think Nalon's a little bit inconsistent, a little bit of just a okay football player that gets a little bit overhyped. So I think Ohio State is the best interior offensive line that Notre Dame is going to play this year. But overall, it's not a great interior offensive line group across all of the schedule.
Okay. Love the breakdown. Thank you, sir. Very well played. Rob says, Vince and Ryan, even though this is the first game against Ohio State, what is the one thing you want to see with the 22 Notre Dame squad that is the most important factor for continued success throughout the season? So not necessarily saying win or loss in Ohio State, but saying what do you need to see success moving forward? I will go. I'll lead off on this one. I'm going to say that I have to go back to quarterback play. I have to see Tyler Buckner have a command of the offense. I need to see him not just be a passenger on the bus. I need to see him driving the bus a little bit. And driving the bus doesn't necessarily mean putting the whole team on his back and just carrying them. What it means is Tyler Buckner needs to be a guy who's distributing the ball, getting it out on time, making throws that guys in the past weren't making, going through your reads, both in the passing game and the run game. I just need to see him have a good, solid handle of the offense and a good, solid handle of the team. Even if they lose against Ohio State, if I see that, I'm going to feel really good about the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one, Vince. I would say for me, offensively, it's about efficiency. I think is like the biggest thing for me, right? And I feel better about where the defense is compared to where the offense is, just because there's a little bit of uncertainty on offense with the first year starting quarterback and a lot of new position coaches coming in. So we need to kind of see what it looks like from a structural perspective. But I really do like the fact that with Coach Heastand coming back, I think that this team is going to move the line of scrimmage better. I think there's going to be more time passing. And if this team is efficient, there's going to be explosive plays that are going to be made because you have a dynamic athlete and dynamic two-way player in a Tyler Buckner, ability to throw the ball, to run the ball. You have explosive players like Deion Colsey and Braden Lindsey and Lorenzo Styles and Chris Tyree. There's going to be some chunk plays, but
Absolutely.
if it's an efficient offense where it's just continuous, you're just getting those chunk plays more and more often, then I think that you're going to put a lot of defenses in a lot of inopportune positions if you're able to be an efficient offense.
No doubt. Love that. Love that a lot. So we were talking about the undersized defensive tackles, right? And that was really bothersome to some people. So Bruce Shearer says, could you cross-train and prepare Fisher at that big defensive tackle spot? Not to play a lot, but in key spots.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, Bruce, could Blake Fisher play defensive tackle? I'm sure, man. Like
he's an athletic dude, no doubt about it.
He's 6'6", 330. He's a good athlete, right? So, sure. But you already have a couple bigger defensive tackles that you're hoping take a step up. So I would rather count on a Gabriel Rubio or a Jason Onye being that guy, right? Like I don't want to force because Blake only played 1.5 football games last year, right? Like I need him to get prepared to play right tackle this year. Right. Like that's going to be the main priority. I don't need to sacrifice any practice time with him playing defensive tackle or practicing in those reps, right? So no, I wouldn't entertain that personally.
If he was my starting right tackle and this was high school, absolutely.
Sure.
Yes. Not in college.
He's going both ways in high school. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. Sorry, dude. Suck it up. You're playing both ways. And I will be the first one to tell you that I don't want any of my linemen going both ways. But when you have a generational player like Blake Fisher, he's going both ways. Okay. But not in college and not at a high D1 college. There's just no. Just no. Because I would never forgive myself if he somehow got rolled up on or got hurt on defense and he was out on the offensive side. Like I would just go home and just cry myself to sleep like multiple times a week. So I would not do that at all. Mm-hmm. Kyle Berry, projections points per game allowed on defense last year was 19.7.
I'm always an optimist, and I always have a little bit of a positive outlook, I would say. So I'm going to say that it improves, Kyle. So 19.7 last year. I'm going to say that Notre Dame is at 18.3, and that has no research. There is no research behind that at all. I have not sat down and broken down what I think the potential scores of these games are going to be and giving you an actual mathematical solution to this one. I'm just saying that I think they're going to be better. That's all.
Yes, I think they will be better as well, both from a scoring standpoint and just from a production standpoint. So I will say that it will be lower. 18 would be great. If there's a number that starts with a 17, that would be fantastic as well.
I need a decimal attached.
17.8. So I'm going half a point better than you did. So I guess we'll see what happens. But no, I think they can be a lot better. And I think they've got an opportunity to face some offenses that are not very good this year. And so that'll obviously help that average come way down. So
yes,
I do think that will be a thing as well.
Yes, UNLV and Marshall should help the points per game average allowed.
And Cal, I don't see them scoring a lot of points. Their calling card is defense. We could work our way through the whole schedule, but I think they're going to have opportunities to limit the amount of points the opposition is scoring for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Brody wants to know top 10 offense plus a top 10 defense. Is that enough to win a title?
Is it enough? It can be. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the year, right? I mean, there's going to be some years where Alabama is a top 3 offense and defense, right? Like a top 5 offense and defense. Like that's going to happen. But like Chief Brody, if you would have told me that last year, maybe, right? Because like, I mean, you're in a year where Stetson Bennett is leading an offense to a national championship. Like it wasn't like Georgia was making their living off of being a great offensive team. They were a great team because they had a great defense. So in a specific year, yes, I think so. But also it's not always a yes.
Yeah.
So it can change a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you, in a perfect world, you need to be in the top 10. If you're at 9 and 10 respectively for both, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time. I think you need to be elite, I think, in one or the other, and then the other one needs to be a nice complement. So if you're top 10 for both, I think one of those needs to be maybe top 5. So I would say that. Now that means they're both top 10, obviously, but yeah. I would want one to be top 5 and one to be top 10. I think that gives you a much better opportunity.
Also, like those end of the year rankings, right? Like they can miss some context at times, right? Because like it's like, if I end up having a top 10 offense and defense at the end of the season, that doesn't mean that maybe I'm not playing at a top 5 level at the end. Maybe I got improved during the season, right? So I think there's a lot of context, Chief Brody, but like, again, I think certain years, yes, certain years, no.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Facilitate Inform says, why do players wear those padded helmet things? What are those? Basically like a pillow for your head. It's supposed to prevent concussions, essentially. Yes. I mean, that's... I don't know how else to explain it, to be honest with you.
It's an extra thing that people are doing to try to help with the head injuries that occur.
Yes. I think because concussions are a real thing, and the more padding you have on your head, the better off you're going to be. They look absolutely ridiculous. There's no question about that. Teams only use them in games, but I will also say that a lot of 7-on-7 type teams are using similar kind of headgear when they're playing.
Well, 7-on-7 can be kind of dangerous, man. You're breaking on a football and you knock heads. And
I have zero problem with them doing that. And to be honest with you, whenever we would play 7-on-7, we would wear helmets. And even that can get dangerous. It's safer for the player wearing the helmet, but then that helmet hitting other parts of other people's bodies.
Taking a knee out or an elbow or
Right. So the padded helmet thing actually is better for all parties concerned as far as for 7-on-7. But I don't know how much I trust those things they put on the helmets in practice. I don't know. I've heard mixed things about those, to be honest with you, but that's what they're intended for. They're intended to reduce the injuries to the head. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Here we go. Archer, a resident Ohio State fan, says OSU's optimism for improved D is based on really talented young guys and a new defensive coordinator. What is the basis for the optimism for Notre Dame's improvement on defense? And he puts at the end, it's a genuine question. Obviously, I'm not a troll. No, we don't think you're a troll, Archer. That is a very legit question, especially for somebody on the outside looking in. Ryan, you want to take the first stab at this one?
Yeah, no, Archer, it's a great question. I would say my biggest optimism is that I think Notre Dame already had a pretty good baseline last year, right? Like they had a lot of positive signs. They have some very impactful football players coming back, mixed in with a lot of new talent that's also coming in. That gets you really excited. And then also I'm really excited because you're going to have the person that was calling defense last year is back on the staff, right? And Marcus Freeman. So you have that working for you.
Sure.
You have Al Golden, who has a lot of experience, has been a lot of levels, has seen a lot of football as a new defensive coordinator coming in. And you have parts of your staff like James Laurinaitis, who's just a grad transfer, who was a great linebacker. And I think when you mix all those things together,
right,
that's what gives me a lot of optimism.
Right. And I will also add to everything you just said, which I agree with. Mm-hmm. I think you add depth and athleticism to your linebacking core, which I think is huge because I think linebacker is a really big part of this defense. And so I like that as well. So a lot of returning parts, a lot of returning pieces, but there's like reinforcements within the depth chart, which I like as well. So that's the optimism. And again, it was a good defense already, but they have a chance to be better. So that's, a very good thing as well.
Absolutely.
David Knight says, at one point in time, do you give up recruiting quarterbacks for 2023? It's kind of like a tipsy guy hitting on every woman at the bar when he keeps getting turned down. Great analogy, David. That's funny.
That's a very interesting analogy, David. I don't. If you did get to that point, I don't think it's any time in the near future because we've talked about this a ton. It's a really deep quarterback class in the 2023 recruiting class. And I have an article that's going to be coming out pretty soon about this actual topic, David, where I think Notre Dame is still a really attractive team for a potential quarterback recruit in 2023. I mean, when you take a look at the wide receiver group, the pass catchers, I should just kind of quantify them, the running backs, and maybe even continuing to pump in another running back in Jeremiah Love if he decides for Notre Dame, and a really good offensive line group, I think. So I think that there's a lot of parts of this team that is very attractive for a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I do think you got caught in a situation where you rode the Dante Moore train as long as you could, and then you got put into a position where a lot of quarterbacks were already off the board when you had to kind of reevaluate things, right? So then also Novosad was a guy, he decides to stay with Baylor. Now they're looking at Kenny Minchie. I think that this is a situation where you're going to see them still be very in the quarterback market, because I think it would be a shame if you missed on a quarterback in this class because it is a really talented quarterback group.
I completely agree. And if it gets to the point where they're just hitting on any quarterback and just looking for a body, then I think you pass. But they're a long ways away from that. They're not just looking for a body. If they get Kenny Minchie, for example, they think that Kenny Minchie can lead them to a championship. I mean, that's how they feel about Kenny Minchie. So they're not at a point where they're talking about, hey, we just got to get somebody to run scout team. Like, we just need somebody. That's not where they're at. If it ever does get to that point, then sure, absolutely. We always talk about how we're a family around here at Irish Breakdown. And so I got to bring this one up from Aaron. Says, Albany, ND, new Notre Dame fan last night, 9 pounds, 2 ounces, 21 and a quarter inches long. Mom and baby are healthy. So that's obviously the most important part, but my goodness, that's a big kid.
That's a monster, Aaron.
There's your defensive tackle right there, filling up the space in the middle. But congratulations, Aaron. Really excited for you. There's nothing like being a parent, and I know Ryan can attest to that as well.
Yeah. Now, Aaron, big congratulations, man. That is a big baby, man. That is definitely healthy, man. Juliet was only 6 pounds, 5 ounces. So, man, way bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations, though, man. That's awesome.
I think my biggest was 9 pounds even. So
really? You had a 9-pounder too.
But that was number 5. You know, they kind of get bigger as you go. Not counting the twins, of course, but
sure.
Yeah, that was he was the biggest one, but that's a big kid right there. So well done. Tell your wife, well done. So
God bless her.
Yeah, no kidding. God bless her. I know what my wife would be saying. It's got a big head because of you. That's what my wife told me. So, all right, moving on. But congratulations, Aaron. Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker. Are we still recruiting Jason Moore? If yes, chances of a flip for Ohio State, especially with all the current commit flip talk out of Columbus.
Josh, I don't think it's highly likely. I do think that Jason Moore is firm in his commitment to Ohio State. I will say, yes, they are still going to recruit him, and they still are actively recruiting him because he's a player that Notre Dame really valued heavily in this class. So they're not going to just stop calling until Jason Moore tells them to stop calling, right? So
and they should be.
Yeah, 100%. So they are still recruiting him. I ultimately think he probably stays with the Buckeyes because, again, he's getting to know just that family a little bit. They're very honest, and they believe in those relationships, right? Good. So he believed in Ohio State. He believed in the coaching staff they had. So I think that he's firm to Ohio State for now anyway.
And I appreciate that from a family, even though they're not firm to Notre Dame. I appreciate that. You make a commitment, you stick with it. I mean, I do appreciate that. So, Jay Henry, do you guys think the crowded running back room at Alabama could impact Love's recruitment? I know you have talked to Jeremiah Love recently, so I will throw this to you.
Yeah, so I'll say this about the Jeremiah Love recruitment. Alabama is definitely near the top of the list now that Alabama has both Richard Young and Justice Haynes committed in the 2023 class. I do think that's going to be a factor, Jay, absolutely. I mean, but there are still other people at work here, right? Like, this isn't just a Notre Dame Alabama battle. Texas A&M, he was just there this past weekend. Michigan is a team that has done a good job with his recruitment. So and I put some intel on the message board. I'm sure you've seen it, Jay, but boards.irishbreakdown.com. I talked a little bit that I do think Notre Dame is the leader, but there is also some other players that are coming hard with different angles and different pitches.
Sure.
So, yeah, but I do think that the Alabama, them having two really good running backs is definitely going to help Notre Dame's favor in that regard. But you also have to remember that Jeremiah Love is a kid that can play wide receiver. He could play safety if he wanted to. Like, he's not just the running back, and he's kind of been firm on that. But I think especially with the running back pitch, if he looks at that depth chart, he's going to be like, why would, that's got to be a part of the equation for him. For sure.
Absolutely. So a lot of the Death Star talk. So John A1 says, if Bama is the Death Star, then Notre Dame is the Force guiding Marcus Skywalker in his X-Wing.
I love that.
That's fantastic.
Love it. I might have to go watch some Star Wars.
To say we really geek out, we could start talking some Star Wars here if you wanted to. But
we should just have a Star Wars watch party one day.
So here's the question that I will ask you.
Uh-oh.
If you are introducing someone to Star Wars, so like a child, right?
Yes.
So someday your child will be introduced to Star Wars, right? I would hope so anyway.
Yes.
Do you show the movies in order the way George Lucas wants you to watch them, episodes 1 through 9, or do you show them in chronological calendar order when they came out in the movie theater?
Calendar order. So we're going 4 through 6 first, then we'll go back to 1 through 3, and then 7 through 9. I do think 7 through 9 was actually, no, I was going to say they're better than 1 through 3, but like probably not. They were both kind of so they have their positives and negatives, but we're definitely starting through 4 through 6 because those are the
starting with
ones,
those,
obviously.
Okay, all right. I was just curious as to which way you would go with that one. That seems like the biggest question, and then the diehards are usually exactly what you just said. So it does make it very interesting. All right, I had to get that out there. So dorky Star Wars talk for a minute. Brian Kelly's Jetstream. I don't remember that name. That's really good though. Over under 10.5 wins this year. And that's obviously set at a higher number than like Vegas is setting it at. I've seen 8.5. I've seen 9.5. I've definitely not seen 10.5.
10.5 is a high number. I'm going to say over though, because I'm an optimist and I'm very optimistic. So yes, I'm going to say over.
It's a really good place to put that number because I feel like the basement for this team is 10. But I feel like they're going to win 11. And so I guess I have to say 11 because that is where my gut tells me that it's going to be. But I feel very like if it was set at 9.5, I'm super happy going over because I don't think that they're going to win any less than 10, right?
That's fair.
But yeah, I will say the over because I'm also optimistic about it. But that is a really good spot to set this number at 10.5. A really good spot.
I love this chat because now we're just talking about Star Wars. It's fantastic.
I went because I want to see what everybody has to say.
It's not a Notre Dame podcast. It is a Star Wars podcast, and some people are mad at me because I didn't talk about Revenge of the Sith as well as I should have, apparently. But sorry.
It's awesome. Oh man, that's good. Ryan Loftus, could Eli Raridan make a change to wide receiver?
I mean, could he? Sure, but like you don't need to make the change, right? I mean, he's a tight end that you can also paint as a big slot, and then you can also put out wide at times, right? I mean, he's
exactly
6 foot. He's near 6'7", and he's going to be 250 plus pounds before you even kind of blink your eyes. So you can departmentalize and use him in different ways. Ryan, great name by the way. But I think that ultimately he's a tight end that can also be detached from the formation. Like you don't have to pigeonhole him into just being a wide receiver or a tight end. It's kind of like the Kyle Pitts conversation from a few years. And I'm not calling him Kyle Pitts. Please do not say that I did. But Kyle Pitts was a tight end that would play in line with Florida, but then also at times he would be out at X and sometimes he'd be in the slot. And there's different ways that you can use tight ends nowadays.
Yep, absolutely. I don't think you need to pigeonhole him as just a wide receiver. I mean, you can use him all over the place. He's a tight end. You can have him in line. You can have him out. I almost feel like you could do more with him as a tight end than you could as just a receiver. And I guess my other argument would be, is he a game-changing receiver for you? Or could he be a game-changing tight end? I think that's the difference for me.
Answer is yes.
Fair enough.
I'm really excited to see him, man. If he's fully healthy, which it looks like he is, I am excited to see Eli Raridan this year.
Okay, very good. I'm a big fan of Eli as well, and everything we're hearing is that he's going to be pretty darn close to full go come the fall too. So that's exciting all by itself.
See, this is what I didn't want to happen. It already happened, Vince.
Did it?
Sure. Ryan just said Raritan is Calpits 2.0. Got it. Yeah, 100% what I said.
Great. It's awesome. And you're right. There's a lot of Star Wars talk in here, which I think is hilarious. All right. Whoops. Didn't mean to bring that up. Apologize. Here we go. The next one. Cameron Ford. I think this is our last one, at least at the moment. Cameron Ford says, if you swapped Ohio State and Notre Dame quarterbacks, would Notre Dame win easily?
I wouldn't say easily. See, look, at this moment right now, I would rather have CJ Stroud than Tyler Buchner. It would not be much of a conversation. Okay. Right. Let's just put that out there for a second. With structurally how this offense wants to run, though, I think that Tyler Buchner's ability as a runner is a big implement. And again, like that could change if you have Stroud versus a Buchner. And I get that conversation, but I don't think that it would be. I think that Notre Dame and Ohio State is a close enough matchup in other spots where I don't think quarterback is the big decider. I think that it's going to matter in the game.
Sure.
To your point earlier, Vince.
Sure.
CJ Stroud needs to play well for Ohio State to win. Tyler Buchner needs to play well for Notre Dame to win. There's no doubt about it. But it's also dependent on a few other things on this team. Like this isn't just going to be a quarterback versus quarterback matchup. Like I think you need a lot of different things for it to be, a easy victory. Because especially when you throw in the word easily, it definitely would not be easy.
Right. I agree with that. I think, look, there's obviously a track record with CJ Stroud. He's a Heisman Trophy, favorite, blah, 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 right? So, of course, I'm going to say that I would take him over Tyler Buchner right now. But I think you make a really good point that I think Tyler Buchner actually fits Notre Dame's offense better than CJ Stroud does. And I think that's a legit point. So, yes, I would take CJ Stroud over Tyler Buchner right now.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be a blowout win for Notre Dame at that point. I don't think that's the difference. I should say I don't think that's the overall difference in the game. So, yeah, absolutely. We're going to end it with this right here from Mace AK. Ryan's Sith name, Darth Recruiting Director. It's pretty fantastic.
I just asked in the chat what your name would be, and I haven't gotten it. Mace, you need to hurry up, man. What would Vince's name be?
Well, while we wait for that, hopefully it's not R2D2, which is what Michael Parks just said. That name is taken, but
Vince Vader, nice.
Ooh, I like that
from Robert Bishop. That's nice.
That's fair.
Vince Vader.
That's fair. That's
Vinny
fair.
Vinny Vader.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for hanging with us on a Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right? Yeah, hanging with us on a Tuesday. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the mailbag. Hope you enjoyed the defensive talk because I love talking defense as well. You would be Darth Kane, man. Oh, that's harsh. That is harsh. But Mace K always knows how to get us out of here. He says, join the message board, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, the notification bell, share this podcast, and leave a 5-star review. Visit the IB store for some awesome merch. And as always, go Irish. And don't forget, tune in for the IB Nation Sports Talk Show tonight at 6:00 with our buddy Sean Stiers. He will be on with Jesse Stiers tonight. So check out the crawl there at the bottom. So make sure you tune in for that as well. And we will be back tomorrow at 1:00 for some more Notre Dame team talk. So for Ryan, I am Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.